A boy sat alone on the steps, wiping away his tears with the sleeve of his old shirt. It seemed as if there was no one in the world who could love him. He had yellow eyes, an unusual color, from which tears flowed incessantly, streaming down his cheeks and leaving wet tracks. Suddenly, another person's hand gently touched his face, giving him the warmth he so desperately craved. The young man raised his head in surprise, wanting to know who this strange stranger was. If someone had given him love earlier, the ending of the story would have been completely different. On the street, a grown man stood in front of the boy, holding a girl in his arms, and with a stern look called him Lucian. The nobleman was attractive, as was the green-haired girl. They shared one outstanding feature: piercing blue eyes. When the name was spoken, the little lady's eyes widened in complete shock, and her mouth dropped slightly open in surprise. Lucian was the boy with black hair and yellow eyes. The aristocrat had come here to meet his younger sister. The young lady recognized the guy because she had seen him in a cartoon webtoon she had read before her reincarnation. Before her reincarnation, the girl lived like a hermit locked in her room, where she lay on her bed and read manga, sinking into depression. Holding the phone in her hand and immersed in the flickering screen, the recluse remained, as if bewitched, not believing her eyes. The manga's cover featured 3 vibrant characters, each with their own distinct personality and attention-grabbing appeal. The ending of the webtoon, "There's Another Doll in the Dollhouse," was filled with deep emotion and tenderness. The beautiful Lucian hugged his beloved, while the roses growing nearby gradually withered. And so, at the moment when she fell asleep, leaving an angry comment, the girl woke up in the body of another person and looked at her new brother in shock. One of the maids, with grace and patience, carefully combed the long, silky flowing hair. At this time, the other maids, with attention and care, surrounded the little mistress, trying to please her and do everything possible for her comfort. Since the lady was a big fan of novels, it was not difficult for her to look around and realize that she had found herself right in the world of mangas. The doors swung open, and a beautiful, fair-haired woman rushed into the room, affectionately calling the girl her baby. Behind her, slowly and deliberately, came a man with green hair and red eyes. They stood next to their daughter and greeted her with warmth and pride, calling her a real beauty who inherited her appearance from her parents. Soon the girl got used to her new life and fully realized herself as the only daughter of a count's couple, becoming Rachel de Orlando. Before leaving, mom and dad, with a gentle smile and kind words, stood in front of the little girl and asked her to wait while they went about their business, promising to return soon. Kneeling in front of his daughter, the father said with a smile that he could always count on her, that the little girl was his pride and support. Throwing herself into the man's arms, the sweet lady was content with the love that was meant for the real Rachel, wanting only to live a happy life. However, that day turned out to be their last, and the sweet couple had to die in a catastrophe, leaving their daughter alone in this world. She, crying into her pillow, felt deep loss and loneliness. While the aristocrat was sinking into grief, her evil uncle took advantage of the situation, seizing power, assuming the title, and taking complete possession of the family estate. The young man, with sincere compassion and deep respect, expressed his deepest condolences on the tragic death of Count Orlando's wife. I felt doubly sorry for the girl who was left without parents. Her loss and loneliness were especially touching in this bitter moment. At that moment, the Duke came to the petite lady's house, introducing himself as her godfather, Leon. Being a friend of the father, he took the baby in his arms and promised from that moment on to protect and care for her as his own daughter. Together, they boarded a luxurious carriage and set off for their new home, where a new stage in life and a bright future awaited them. An awkward silence fell between Rachel and the mysterious man sitting across from her, as if words had lost their meaning in this tense moment. Soon the nobles arrived at a magnificent building that resembled a fairy tale castle with majestic towers and sophisticated architecture. Leon and Rachel got out of the carriage and stopped in front of a huge estate impressive in its grandeur and majesties. The girl couldn't hide her surprise. Her mouth dropped open in delight when she saw the building. Her eyes filled with admiration, and her heart began to beat faster. Taking the girl in his arms, the godfather told her, with warmth and confidence, that everything that belonged to his family would now become her property. Since the lady was Liam's daughter, he perceived her as his own biological daughter. Leon held the baby close to him, trying to numb the pain of losing his parents. However, their touching moment was interrupted by an unexpected man who suddenly appeared and confidently called the Duke his father. With a serious and wary face, the aristocrat dressed in his elegant attire asked his son what his intention was in appearing at that moment, interrupting such a delicate and important meeting. When Rachel turned to look at the boy, he announced that he had come to see his little sister in person. Leon took the boy's words kindly, glad that he had finally done what he liked, showing patience and waiting a long time for the new member of their family to appear. After which, the man introduced the baby, calling her by name, while she quietly looked at her new brother. She already knew Lucian from the webtoon, thanks to his long black eyelashes, golden eyes, scarlet lips, and the indifference on his face that always made him stand out from the others. In addition, his distinctive feature was a mole near his eyelid, which added even more uniqueness and charm. This guy was the main character of the manga, and Rachel's favorite, who won the woman's heart with his mystery and charisma. The dark-faced character was often referred to as a repentant madman, known as Gon Lucien de Leon. The girl flinched when her godfather's voice, suddenly breaking through from her memories, brought her back to reality. He reminded her that very soon her full name would be Rachel de Leon. Now it became clear to the imposter whose place she had taken. This body belonged to the protagonist's younger sister, a beautiful and attractive aristocrat. Because the Duke often spoiled his daughter, she grew up to be a real brat who often annoyed and bullied Lucian. Ultimately, the evil noblewoman suffered a fatal fate. The noblewoman died at the hands of her brother, ending up as a lifeless body on the floor. Rachel felt an icy shudder run through her body in horror at her terrible end, internally plunging into panic and despair, realizing the inevitability of her fate. The two male representatives stared at the little girl in bewilderment, not understanding why she was so worried and trembling with fear. Rachel resisted steadfastly, refusing to accept death, despite the piercing gaze of the handsome man who was watching her with a hint of awkwardness and silent surprise. Sitting in the majestic hall, surrounded by luxury and abundance, the little lady slowly and inexorably sank into the depths of despondency. Clutching her head, Rachel decided to think carefully again and put everything in its place in order to understand the difficult situation and find a way out of the predicament. It was known that Lucian never knew happiness in his childhood and was always under the strict control and inexorable will of his father. Leon was a merciless tyrant towards the free boy, often taking hold of a stick and using it to teach him cruel lessons. This torturous practice continued day after day. The man himself, whose name was Pedro, had also suffered beatings 20 years earlier from his own father, the former Duke. One could say that this violence had been passed down from generation to generation. The reason for this hatred was Pedro's love not for women, but for men. More specifically, it was for a guy with bright hair who often spent time with him. This guy with a kind smile and violet eyes was not only the object of the Duke's son's love, but also Rachel's father. His full name was Liam de Orlando. The two holding hands hid their true feelings under the guise of male friendship, allowing others to think that their relationship was purely platonic. But everything changed when the then Duke learned of Leon's secret meetings and decided to rectify the situation by using psychological torture and his own force of authority to break someone else's will. Eventually, the two men's paths diverged, and they were forced to part, breaking the bond they had tried to maintain despite all the obstacles. Instead of his true love, Leon was forced to marry a noble lady chosen for him by his strict father. Soon they had a little son who amazingly inherited the physical features of both parents. However, he was most reminiscent of Leon's hated father, which left a permanent shadow in his son's eyes, a reminder that their connection to the past and dark memories would never fade. The little lady chewed on the delicious macaroni, feeling a headache starting to develop from all the complex and confusing relationships that were going on among the men in this family. Crumbs of sweets remained on the girl's face. She herself was gloomily pondering her fate, immersed in dark thoughts about her possible demise. Rachel folded her arms across her chest and tried to cheer herself up, convincing herself that things weren't so bad. The aristocrat mentally pictured a future in which life with her favorite awaited her. Suddenly, in the silence of the room filled with thoughtful calm, a loud and piercing knock was heard at the door, disturbing the peaceful atmosphere. Entered the room after the permission to enter was given still radiant in his elegant outfit, which emphasized his grace and confidence. Rachel was forced to cover her eyes with her hand due to the blinding glare emanating from the nobleman. The guy himself admitted that he came to talk to his sister. He explained that he needed to meet with her to discuss important issues and establish a connection. Smiling sweetly, the girl immediately nodded politely, inviting Lucian to join her, trying not to anger the potential executioner who could threaten her future. Seated elegantly on a chair, the young man with unshakable calm and refined dignity kept his face free from any display of emotion, demonstrating impeccable self-control. The lady watching what was happening nearby could not contain her delight and admiration, mesmerized by the charm of the webtoon's main character. Suddenly, another person entered the room. Rachel's personal maid, a refined and sophisticated woman, with her hair pulled back into a neat bun on her head. The servants, noticing that the mistress was in the company of the master, immediately froze in place, trying not to violate the unwritten rules of politeness and to remain unnoticed. The girl immediately turned to the maid and politely asked for another cup of tea, demonstrating her desire to spend time in pleasant conversation with her brother. The maid slowed down, and Rachel frowned in displeasure. Lucian, noticing this, declared that he would leave soon, not wishing to linger any longer than was necessary. Resting her head on her hand, the little girl explained to the maid that she wanted to spend time with her brother, demonstrating her request with genuine sincerity. The maid, overcome with confusion and inner doubts, cautiously turned away, but overcoming her hesitation obediently, and without unnecessary questions, carried out her mistress's order. While the tea was being prepared, the noblewoman offered her cup to the eldest boy, assuring him that she had not drunk from it, and with a gentle smile handed the cup over so that he could enjoy the drink. Lucian objected and shook his head from side to side, saying that he should not drink the sweet drink. Rachel tilted her head to the side in surprise, looked at Lucian curiously, and asked with genuine interest what was the reason for such a restriction. Having received the answer that it was not yet time for the meal, the girl's expression changed with sadness and horror, reflecting deep disappointment. At that moment, sitting opposite the aristocrat on a soft chair, the girl realized her destiny. All the circumstances and her own feelings came together to form a single whole. One only needed a sad glance at those thin wrists to understand the importance of what was happening. After all, Lucian looked exhausted, as if his skin was stretched over his bones. He had never expressed emotions with tears, and it seemed that in such a state he would hardly be able to grow into a strong and healthy man. Without his younger sister's help, the mad tyrant wouldn't be able to transform into the magnificent, handsome man he could have been in the manga. The author froze awkwardly, like a squirrel frozen in front of a monitor, when he heard the loud exclamations of his character, who declared that he was not going to put up with the inevitable tragic end, but intended to change his fate. Forcing a smile onto her face, the lady had difficulty learning from her brother that he lived according to a strictly established daily routine, which brought even more strictness and formality into his daily life. According to the manga, Lucian trained alone every day at dawn, before the sun had even risen above the horizon, immersing himself in his exercises in the silence of the early mornings. The growing organism ate only bread and vegetable soup, limiting its diet to the simplest and most accessible dishes. And after training, he went to his strict father, who, despite family ties, did not hesitate to injure his own son, demonstrating cruelty and ruthlessness. The servants' reactions also spoke volumes about the state of affairs. No one in the house felt any particular sympathy for the boy, and his presence did not evoke any warmth in those around him. So Rachel decided to trick the future Duke by offering him 2 daily routines, one main one, which was intended for everyday life, and a second backup one in case the first one did not go according to plan. This gave Lucian serious pause, as he was completely unaware of the existence of 2 different schedules. The little lady immediately began to actively gesticulate and persistently convince her relative that life would become much simpler and more comfortable. The future Duke hesitated before making his decision, and considered it necessary to obtain his father's permission to finally confirm his chosen course of action. Rachel, her eyes pretending to be big and innocent, looked at her pet, trying to convince him that he should ask for approval. In her past life, the girl had read original books and couldn't even imagine that the life of a nobleman would be so similar to a puppet show, full of strictly regulated roles and formalities. Pretending to wipe away tears with a handkerchief, the aristocrat lamented that now that they were a family, they should spend time together, emphasizing the importance of family ties. Unable to resist his sister's charm, Lucian agreed to try to gain Leon's approval, realizing that this could pave the way for the changes he desired. Immediately stopping feigning sadness, Rachel joyfully exclaimed that she would look forward to their meeting, expressing delight and joy at the upcoming event. Peering out from behind the door, the girl waved goodbye to the boy and said that she really enjoyed spending time with him, expressing gratitude for the time they spent together. With a dull, deafening bang, the door slammed behind Lucian, who, immersed in his thoughts and worries, went off to do his business. The nobleman strolling through the estate was amazed at his naivety, believing that his new sister would turn out to be just a small and stupid girl, carefreely weaving her childish fantasies. However, during tea, she immediately outlined her rights and responsibilities, clearly defining boundaries and establishing clear rules, which left him completely confused. The frustrated boy stood by the window, running his finger along the glass. Unlike her, he had been unable to experience any love or warmth from his own family, leaving him completely alone and sad. Lucian pondered how he could successfully combine and implement two completely different daily routines. Before Mr. Madam, she made a request for permission to reintroduce herself as Amber, making an elegant curtsy. The maid's job was not only to help her mistress put on a new elegant dress, but also to escort her with exquisite and refined care to the dining room where her new family was waiting for her. In a stunning pink dress, Rachel walked like a flower behind Amber through the luxurious halls, which shimmered with golden lights and exquisite decorations. She mentally ordered herself to pull herself together, realizing that she had many important and urgent matters ahead of her that required her full concentration and responsibility. In the original version, the adult Rachel lay on the cold floor, with a look of pity and hopelessness on her face. The girl felt the life gradually leave her body, leaving only emptiness and pain. Also, one of the tasks of the world traveler was to save her beloved from self-destruction and bullying by others in order to restore hope and peace to him. First of all, it was necessary to change the feelings of the Duke, a strict and callous father, in order to soften his cruelty and teach him to show compassion and understanding. In addition, the girl did not know whether Lucian's mother, the Duchess, was going to attend the dinner, which added uncertainty to her plans. The woman's name was Camilla de Leon. She was middle-aged with fair hair and expressionless empty eyes that did not reveal her true feelings. As far as was known, the noblewoman suffered from depression, spending time in her room by the window and not leaving her refuge immersed in the darkness of her thoughts. The woman seemed to completely ignore or deliberately pretend not to notice the humiliation and abuse that her own negligent son was enduring, preferring to remain on the sidelines. Rachel sighed heavily, expressing her disdain for Lucian's family, whom she called lousy, and blamed for her mental health problems, not hiding her displeasure and irritation. Amber stopped and informed the little lady that they had arrived, noticing that something was off about the aristocrat. The lady's behavior showed signs of anxiety or discomfort. Opening the door, the servants announced to the Duke with majestic respect and special solemnity the arrival of the guests, giving this moment the importance and formality befitting their high position. Leon sat at the head of the table, beaming from ear to ear, as a multitude of exquisite dishes were laid out on the table. A variety of salads, meat delicacies, delicious treats, and sweet desserts, creating an abundance of flavors and aromas. Rachel, shocked, froze when she saw the abundance of dishes and treats prepared especially for her, which impressed her with their scale and sophistication. Smiling broadly, Leon joyfully greeted his newly arrived daughter, greeting her with genuine good nature and joy that was reflected in his every movement, as if the man saw in her a long-awaited miracle. As she approached the table, the little girl could not figure out for which of her relatives or friends this exquisite and magnificent banquet was organized. Besides her and the man, there was no one else at the table. Even Lucian was absent. Rachel had to constantly remind herself to watch her face and maintain an outward calm. Therefore, sitting down next to the Duke, the girl joyfully greeted him with a bright and sincere smile, trying to create an atmosphere of comfort and warmth despite the silence and the absence of other guests. When asked if anyone else was coming to dinner, Leon replied that no one else was expected. He wanted to spend time exclusively with his daughter, which was extremely important to him. With slight embarrassment and inner tension, Rachel expressed her gratitude to the aristocrat for his favor, while carefully hiding her excitement and awkwardness. During this time, Lucian, in complete solitude, trained diligently, striking the opponent's doll and honing his fighting skills, striving to achieve perfection in every technique. Feeling that something was wrong with the situation and that Leon's love should belong to his son, the little girl took the napkin in her hands and, with obvious excitement, asked the Duke for permission to ask a question. The Duke, smiling and believing that he could expect any question, looked closely at the girl, ready to answer all doubts and requests. With concern and excitement on her face, Rachel asked in a trembling voice if the man really had serious intentions of adopting the baby. The aristocrat did not hesitate to confirm her fears, explaining that it was his duty as a godfather to become the guardian of his best friend's daughter, as he felt obligated to fulfill this important role. With her head bowed, the little girl was struck by the sincere intentions of the Duke, who, despite his status and strictness, was ready to so quickly and selflessly accept a stranger into his family. The little girl's next question was why her older brother was absent during mealtime, and what could have been the reason for his absence at this important moment of the family gathering. The Duke immediately felt uneasy from his daughter's pleading and sad look, but he still tried to justify himself, explaining that Lucian had her own daily routine. But Rachel wasn't about to back down. With a dazzling smile sparkling in her eyes, she persistently asked the new dad if Lucian could change his plans and join the family for dinner. It was quite cheeky of her, but instead of getting angry or objecting, Leon simply smiled back and said that he would do whatever his little one wanted. The man ordered the servants to immediately bring the naughty child to the dining room, demanding that this be done as quickly as possible in order to correct the situation and bring everyone to order. Smiling happily, Rachel thanked her godfather again for his understanding and willingness to arrange a meeting, despite all the difficulties and misunderstandings. Approaching the little lady, the Duke remarked how remarkably she resembled her father, noting the similarity in features and manners. The aristocrat saw in her his old friend and lover, who had left this world only recently. The girl's resemblance to him was so striking that it evoked in him deep nostalgia and the pain of loss. They stood in complete shock, unable to believe their ears, when the announcement of Mr. Lucian's arrival came like a bolt from the blue. The boy entered the room, attracting attention with his unearthly appearance. As always, he was impeccably dressed and had a serious, focused expression on his face. Rachel, seeing her elder brother, immediately went towards him. The boy sat down opposite her, also placing himself next to his so-called father, and took his place at the table as is proper in such a situation. After tasting the aromatic dish from the menu, Rachel immediately asked her brother to try the treat and enjoy its taste, sharing with him the pleasure of this exquisite dish. Lucian watched the other family members silently obeying their orders and not interfering in what was happening. There was a jealousy in his golden eyes that was invisible to those around him, but obvious in the intense gaze and subtle changes in his facial expression that gave his demeanor a dark air. Having finished her meal, the girl jumped up from her seat and said a warm farewell to the Duke and her brother, expressing her gratitude for their attention. The Duke waved his hand joyfully, saying goodbye to the girl, while Lucian stood calmly and quietly nearby, watching the scene with an unperturbed expression. Together with the maid, Rachel slowly walked away from the hall, leaving the men standing in the hall and heading towards her room, where the lady hoped to find peace and privacy after this long and tiring day. After the sweet girl had left his sight, the Duke, frowning, ordered the younger one to come to his office, immediately tolerating no objections. Naive Rachel, walking around her new home with a blissful smile on her face, had no idea that her kind-hearted attitude towards Lucian only intensified his suffering and added even more torment to the pain. Holding onto the wall, the aristocrat's son barely made it through the corridors of the estate, trying not to fall after the harsh lesson he had received from his father. Instead of acknowledging his own child, Leon summoned the foolish boy to his home to punish him for his willful intrusion into his daughter's room. The Duke was deeply outraged by the boy's unheard-of insolence and willful behavior, which made him unable to even obey simple commands, leaving him feeling disappointed and angry. Moreover, the boy had the courage to start making excuses, which immediately caused even more anger in the man, and Leon immediately interrupted him, not allowing him to continue. All that interested the current Duke was how Lucian managed to convince the naive Rachel to personally invite her brother to dinner, despite all his interference. The resolutely strict father took up a stick to teach his stupid boy proper manners and squeeze all the nonsense out of him, since the girl could not be involved in evil machinations. The boy was breathing heavily, unable to regain his breath, which had become disrupted after the incident, and each breath was difficult for him. Lucian continued to walk quickly towards the room where he could take refuge from his troubles and find at least some comfort and peace. New luxurious dresses of various cuts, made from the most expensive fabrics and richly decorated with jewels, were a generous gift from the Duke. Rachel couldn't take her eyes off the enchanting outfits displayed before her, completely amazed by their sophistication and splendor, which literally captivated her with their beauty. Amber, with a broad smile, offered the lady, who clearly couldn't decide to try on at least one of these magnificent dresses, each of which was made with impeccable taste. To the surprise of the servants, the girl chose a blue dress, which, despite its simplicity, turned out to be the most modest and decent of all the options, offered radiating sophistication and refinement. After Rachel had made her choice of clothes, she confidently walked towards the meeting with Camilla, with the maid following her like a shadow accompanying her mistress. Bowing before the young lady, the other servant apologized, but unfortunately could not allow entry into Lucian's mother's chambers as she was busy. With her hair disheveled and her head bowed, the girl couldn't understand what to expect. It was unlikely that the owner of the house wanted to see the stepdaughter her husband had brought home from a previous affair. The man who never loved Camilla and married her for political reasons soon hated her son, who was caring for the daughter of his previous love. It all ended tragically. Camilla, falling to her knees in utter despair, blamed her husband for the irreversible failures of their family life, after which, unable to bear the mental pain, she lost consciousness and soon died. Accepting the maid's refusal, Rachel wished the Duchess a speedy recovery and expressed her sincere hopes for the woman's rapid return to health. The girl hoped in her mind that her mother would quickly come to her senses and be able to take care of the family before it was too late. After all, Lucian stood with a sword over his enemies, who lay lifeless on the ground. When Amber inquired if they were going to return to the ladies' quarters, she replied with slight surprise that she already had other plans that required her attention and time. Instead of patiently waiting for an answer, she could not contain her impatience and insistently demanded to know immediately where exactly her brother was, her voice trembling with excitement and anxiety. At this time, Lucian was sitting in his room, surrounded by the dim light of the lamp, with a thoughtful and bored expression on his face. He was slowly and casually writing notes on a piece of paper, immersed in his thoughts. His usual daily routine was suddenly disrupted when his sister, with a joyful smile on her face, entered the room carrying a basket of delicious food in her hands to lift the boy's spirits. The aristocrat was clearly shocked and surprised by the little lady's unexpected visit, which suddenly disturbed the peace. Knowing how poorly Lucian was eating, the girl decided to visit him personally to make sure he was eating more, and offered to share his lunch with him, hoping to improve his nutrition in this way. The nobleman ordered the little girl to return to her chambers and not disturb him, since the boy was scheduled to rewrite a history book, which required complete concentration. When asked about the two schedules, Lucian rudely replied that his father insisted on the need to maintain the basic routine and follow the order without any exceptions. The Duke's son, returning to the table, replied that only by observing a strict schedule and discipline could he become a worthy successor to the dynasty. But at that moment, Lucian suddenly froze as the gentle touch of the fingers holding the grapes slid across his cheek, causing a trembling feeling. Without wasting any time to think, the girl decisively made the decision to take care of her brother herself, realizing that his absorption in his studies left him little time to take care of himself. Lucian stared in confusion at the little lady, who waited patiently for him to open his mouth and try the sweet treat he offered her. Deciding to comply, the boy obediently opened his mouth, ready to accept the grapes. Arguing with Rachel was useless. The little girl felt like a true winner, like she had scored the winning goal in a football match, when she managed to convince her brother to eat at least a little of the food offered. After she asked if it was tasty, Lucian suddenly froze in place, his face taking on a blank and colorless expression, which deeply frightened the girl and caused alarm. After that, he suddenly turned to the young lady, and a surprised expression appeared on the man's face. His heart began to beat faster, and a whole range of emotions could be read in his eyes. Hoping that her brother liked the offered treat, Rachel, with a gentle smile, asked him not to be distracted by her, and to concentrate on his studies so as not to disrupt the work rhythm. A large blot of ink formed on the paper, which, like an inept stain on a work of art, ruined the entire text that had been written earlier. While the guy carefully held a piece of paper in his hands, trying to get rid of an unfortunate blot, Rachel, seeing his anxiety, offered him to enjoy fresh raspberries. At that moment, a loud knock suddenly interrupted them, causing them to stop their exciting game of berry eating and instantly become distracted from the current situation. The unexpected interruption shattered their cozy atmosphere. This person turned out to be Amber, who came to accompany the lady, adding a touch of solemnity and respect. Since the Duke himself had invited the little lady, Rachel had to leave the basket of raspberries with the guy, and leave so as not to delay the aristocrat and not disturb his time. Waving goodbye, the girl wished the handsome man luck in rewriting the text, and satisfied with this, left, leaving the boy focused on his task. Obeying his sister, he tried the raspberries, but to his disappointment, they turned out to be completely tasteless and did not bring the expected pleasure. Although the berry the lady served him was incredibly pleasant, its taste was completely new and unique, revealing unexpected nuances and bringing extraordinary pleasure to the senses. An ominous shadow suddenly appeared behind Lucian and whispered in his ear that it was because of her evil magic that the boy had lost the ability to taste any food. In a cold voice, the boy ordered the evil one not to interfere in the conversation anymore, making it clear that he did not want any continuation of this unpleasant interaction. A whole month has passed since Rachel began living in the luxurious mansion, assuming the role of the Duke's official daughter. During this time, the lady has become accustomed to her new surroundings. When the little girl came to visit the Duchess, the servants again refused her visit, citing the mistress's illness, which clearly created new barriers to their communication. The Duke continued to be kind and merciful to her, not changing his previous attitude and showing unwavering warmth and attention. Lucian continued to train with the sword as diligently as before, without diminishing his dedication and pursuit of excellence in the art of fencing. Noticing that someone had joined him, the boy froze in place and turned towards the intruder, ready to greet the new participant in the training with caution and attention. Frightened and with obvious tension, the boy recoiled from his sister, who had come again to feed her stupid brother with a kind smile. Turning away from the little lady, he warned the little one not to come close during the training so as not to interfere with her concentration on the exercise. Moreover, Lucian could accidentally hit her. The girl immediately apologized for her intrusion and suggested taking a break to rest on a bench after intense physical exercise. Realizing that resistance was futile, the boy agreed to take a break and sat down next to his sister to rest and recuperate. She began to take something out of a large box she had brought with her. Large beads of sweat trickled down the Duke's son's face, slowly rolling down his cheeks. But even in this exhausting state, the webtoon's protagonist continued to be the embodiment of irresistible beauty. Holding an iced tea in her hand, Rachel offered the boy a refreshing drink to help ease the heat. However, the girl was shocked and stunned when the boy admitted that her frequent visits only worsened his condition. Because of this, it became difficult for him to follow his schedule. Rachel, full of determination, relentlessly sought out the guy for several months. She found the aristocrat in every familiar place, trying to find a moment to talk. Most likely, the girl had already managed to bore the handsome man who silently watched her with his golden eyes, showing neither emotion nor interest. Realizing that the problem was that her meetings were not scheduled, the girl lowered her head sadly. The boy, noticing her depressed state, objected. Slowly, he realized that the problem was indeed the routine, not the reluctance to see his little sister. Rachel was especially pleased to hear how genuinely she cared about her feelings. Such warm and sincere concern penetrated the depths of her soul, warming her fragile heart and giving her a feeling of security and tenderness. The solution to the problem turned out to be simple. The girl suggested simply including herself in her brother's schedule so that they could find time to communicate without any unnecessary complications. Not understanding what exactly was meant, Lucian, staring at the little girl in bewilderment, asked her with obvious surprise what exactly she meant, hoping to clarify this confusing situation. The guy decided not to miss his sister's efforts and try the iced tea that she so carefully prepared, realizing that such care deserves attention and recognition. Reflecting, the boy explained that if he included his sister in his schedule, she would have to accompany him all day, which could be difficult and inconvenient for both parties. Embarrassed, the little lady covered her mouth with her hands, and her blue eyes lit up from such an incredible opportunity to be next to her brother all day. Approaching Lucian, the girl, with trepidation in her voice, asked to set aside some free time to spend with her. The nobleman began to fuss and said that he would first like to ask his father about his opinion on this matter in order to be sure that his decision was correct. Rachel smiled at this answer and said that everything was fine. She did not want to cause more difficulties for her brother, who was already having big problems with the Duke. Sitting next to his sweet sister, the guy nevertheless promised her that he would definitely ask his dad for permission in the near future. These words brought genuine joy to the little girl. She smiled widely and then burst into loud, ringing laughter, filled with happiness and delight, unable to contain her emotions. Rising from her seat, the girl began to dance joyfully and spin around herself, expressing her joy through graceful movements. The meeting between the sister and brother was suddenly interrupted by Leon, who entered the room accompanied by Amber. He greeted his daughter warmly and kindly. Ignoring his son's presence and gently stroking Rachel's head, the man informed her with a warm smile that the dress was finally ready. The man suggested that she go and try on the new outfit. Lucian could only dream of how, when he completed his academic program, his father would come up to him, hug him, and tell him how proud he was of him expressing his pride and admiration for his son's achievements. The boy's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Rachel waving goodbye, as she turned and waved her hand at her brother, expressing her tenderness and warm feelings. However, instead of saying bye, the guy remained standing and silently watched his sister leave, lost in his thoughts and feelings. The Duke sternly ordered his son to enter his office, emphasizing the seriousness of his intentions and the urgent need for immediate execution of the order in order to show the importance and urgency of this demand. The man was furious at the boy's behavior, not understanding why he continued to act stupidly and recklessly, despite all the warnings and advice. The boy had no answer to the question of why Rachel sought to meet him so often, and he was left confused, not understanding the reasons for her persistence. The Duke shuddered at the sight of those amber eyes, feeling how the same empty gaze of his father involuntarily returned to him in his memories, evoking heavy feelings in his soul. It was this vile man who separated the couple in love, and perhaps Leon and Liam would have stayed together if not for the intervention of others who destroyed their happiness. Pedro simply couldn't bear the thought of Lucian, who resembled his grandfather, spending time with sweet Rachel. The prospect was unsettling and deeply resented. Loudly and with obvious irritation, the aristocrat called his son disgusting, which caused the boy deep pain. In an attempt to justify himself, the boy declared that he would not even dare to think of corrupting his innocent sister. Leon ordered his offspring not to meet with the girl anymore, even if she herself wanted to continue communication, emphasizing his determination and strict approach to this issue. After leaving his parents' room, Lucian looked down sadly. The truth was that he was indeed jealous of the lady, but he never wanted to use her for his own purposes. As the boy staggered towards his room, he thought about what he needed to do now, to make his father notice his efforts and appreciate them. The evil voice insistently insisted that he should stop his efforts and allow the darkness to consume the soul of the future Duke, pushing him towards thoughts of hopelessness and resignation. Deep down, the boy was forced to admit to himself that in the eyes of his parents, he would forever remain just a shadow incapable of taking a significant place in their lives. It was extremely tempting to listen to the voice that offered relief from the excruciating trials and suffering, providing an enticing opportunity to escape from all the difficulties. But before Lucian gave permission for evil to take over his body, he was distracted by the ringing voice of his sister, who suddenly appeared in front of him, interrupting the darkness of his thoughts and filling his heart with unexpected light. The boy stared at the little girl in surprise, unable to understand what she was doing there and why she had appeared at this moment. Leaning forward, the girl asked if her brother had anything else to do, or if he was already on a break, wondering if they could spend time together. Smiling, Rachel promised that she would not interfere and would try not to distract her brother from his work so that he could calmly finish his studies and focus on important tasks. She just wanted to accompany her relative to his room, and nothing more to make sure that the guy would reach his destination safely and without any unnecessary difficulties. Their hands met and intertwined, creating a strong and warm connection, filled with mutual understanding and tenderness that was reminiscent of a deep emotional and spiritual unity strengthening their relationship. Lucian tightened his grip on Rachel's hand, feeling their hands clasped tightly. After all, there was one person in this house who noticed him and who cared about the boy. The aristocrat's mouth dropped open in surprise when her brother showed her affection for the first time unexpectedly and touchingly, demonstrating his warm affection which had previously seemed unattainable. Pointing her finger forward, Rachel insistently urged Lucian to move faster. There was nothing left for him to do but obey his sweet sister's request, and he obediently followed her. Walking down the hallway with the boy, the petite lady couldn't hide her happiness, enjoying this sweet stroll with her favorite character. The girl approached the guy and asked if he had a scheduled history rewrite. He confirmed it and agreed. Rachel, deeply upset and barely holding back her tears, realized that they were almost at the door of the Duke's son's room, and this realization only increased her inner excitement and sadness. Holding her brother's hand and barely holding back tears, the girl admitted that she was no longer able to continue on her way, as her legs were in great pain and refused to obey. Looking pleadingly at Lucian and flashing sad eyes, Rachel put on her most sad expression, asking for them to stop. The girl was already thinking that the aristocrat would abandon her, but instead he knelt down. It turned out that the guy had come up with a brilliant solution. He offered to carry the baby on his back. Hugging her favorite webtoon character, she held him tightly, not believing her happiness and feeling her heart overflowing with joy. Carefully trying not to disturb his peace, the girl carefully slid off Lucian's back, who knelt down, showing amazing patience and attentiveness to her needs. With a smile on her face, the lady heartily thanked the guy for his invaluable help and sincere kindness, expressing deep appreciation for his thoughtfulness and generosity. He only nodded silently in response and gently asked the girl to rest, demonstrating his care and attention. Rachel waved goodbye to her brother, which had become a tradition for her. Her heart was full of sadness, as it was difficult for her to part with the person she wanted to spend more time with. Having closed the door behind him, Lucian leaned against it, immersed in deep thought, and froze in this position, trying to organize his thoughts. After that, he took one last look at the girl's room, felt a brief moment of regret, and collecting his thoughts, left leaving behind a light shadow of memories. The day came when the mistress finally invited the surprised Rachel into her chambers. The girl was informed of this by the maids who respectfully conveyed the important message from their mistress. Open-mouthed in delight, Rachel felt a deep sense of satisfaction at the Duchess's giving her the chance to greet her, feeling her heart fill with joy and gratitude. One of the servants, behaving with exceptional respect, slightly opened the door to Leon's wife's chambers, allowing the lady to enter. There, inside a luxuriously furnished room, a noble woman in a dark dress and with a strict hairstyle sat on a sofa. She gazed thoughtfully into the distance, lost in her thoughts, creating an atmosphere of deep tranquility. Entering inside, the girl, with grace and confidence, introduced herself by the name of her real father, proudly calling herself Rachel de Orlando. The little girl, enchanted by the atmosphere around her, suddenly froze in place with genuine amazement when she was unexpectedly asked about the meaning of the mysterious word mirage. The noble lady, with grace in her voice, told that in the country neighboring the great empire, there was a huge desert covered with endless dry sands, stretching to the very horizon. The woman told the story of a traveler who, having separated from his caravan, was forced to wander alone through the merciless sands of the desert for several days, experiencing hardships and deprivations. Tormented by intense thirst, and already despairing of finding a way, the man wandered through the desert, when suddenly an oasis with crystal-clear water sparkling in the rays of the sun opened up before him. Rushing towards the oasis with all his might, he scooped up a generous amount of crystal-clear water in his palms, barely believing his good fortune. However, when he brought it to his mouth, instead of the long-awaited coolness, he felt only the bitter taste of sand. Turning her head indifferently to the side, the lady, with a slight hint of boredom in her voice, asked those present what Rachel thought about this. Turning her head indifferently to the side, the lady, with a slight hint of boredom in her voice, asked what Rachel thought about this. Whether mirages really only occur in deserts, or whether they can be found in other places as well. Obedient Rachel, having listened carefully to the warning, readily agreed and promised to remain vigilant to avoid the dangers hidden in the desert sands. The world traveler didn't want to stay with this family for long. As soon as Lucian found happiness, she would leave immediately so as not to disturb him. Smiling, the girl asked the heroine not to worry, and assured her that everything would be fine, despite the difficulties that arose, adding that together they would overcome any obstacles. Rachel will leave unnoticed as soon as the Duke finally finds true happiness and falls deeply in love with another aristocrat who becomes his chosen one. A strong hand held the sword confidently and firmly swinging it with dexterity and power, creating an impressive visual effect. It was Lucian, tired and exhausted after a long and grueling workout, wiping the sweat from his brow. His muscles were still trembling from the strain, and his heavy, ragged breathing filled the surrounding space. He thought he saw his little sister rushing towards him from the side. Her face was beaming with a joyful smile, and her arms were flapping merrily like the wings of a bird in flight, expressing genuine happiness at the meeting. The boy felt deeply uneasy, because the little lady who always came at this time was late today. He could not get rid of the disturbing thoughts. An evil voice coming from behind whispered into the tired Duke's ear, questioning his expectations. The darkness could not believe that he truly believed in the child's permanent return. The villain continued to whisper, sowing doubts in the boy's mind, claiming that the little girl could have taken his place because of the Duke's excessive love, which was clear evidence of injustice. When the meeting with the noble young lady ended, Rachel, completely exhausted from fatigue and emotional stress, left her chambers barely able to move her legs. Suddenly, the girl's thoughts were interrupted by a man who, showing genuine concern, asked whether the meeting with Leon's wife had gone well. It was the butler, with a stern face and a stern look, who conveyed that Pedro was awaiting the arrival of his daughter with impatience, preparing for her arrival. With her head tilted to the side and her brow furrowed, the little girl tried to understand the reason for such anticipation, trying to decipher the cause of her father's anxiety. As soon as Rachel's arrival was announced, the Duke immediately jumped up from his seat, joyfully welcoming her appearance. His face lit up with a genuine smile, and his eyes sparkled with excitement and joy. With a smile on his face, Pedro invited the little lady to go for a walk together, hoping to spend time with her and enjoy the fresh air. Moreover, the man also offered to buy Rachel something tasty, such as sweets or a toy, to please the little lady and make her day even more special. Having received the girl's consent, Pedro was about to lead her to the map, but the little girl put forward one condition that needed to be taken into account before continuing their journey. Rachel wanted to take her older brother with her, but realizing it was too early, she agreed to go for a walk with the Duke alone. To this, the aristocrat said that he would be glad if the little girl called him Daddy. Smiling understandingly, the nobleman also realized that she might be uncomfortable and was willing to wait as long as it took, showing patience and respect for the other person's feelings. He began to gently stroke her green hair with his hand, assuring her that he would not rush things and would give her time to get used to what was happening, showing his sensitivity and understanding. Holding her new dad's hand, the girl walked out into the street with trepidation and excitement, leaving the cozy and warm chambers of the luxurious mansion, anticipating new adventures and unknown horizons. The sound of men's footsteps could be heard, their shoes rhythmically tapping on the floor, creating a confident and decisive sound that filled the space with an atmosphere of seriousness and intentionality. It was Lucian walking through the corridors of the estate, lost in his thoughts, considering the possibility that Rachel could take his place as heir. Feeling growing tired, the boy paused, and leaning against the wall, began to breathe heavily. Feeling the tension fading and his strength gradually leaving him, the servant stopped in surprise and saw the exhausted gentleman who, leaning against the wall, was clearly experiencing fatigue and physical exhaustion. They exchanged glances and silently came to the same decision that in such a situation they should act cautiously and not interfere, realizing that their help could only make the situation worse. Instead of offering assistance, they passed by, silently ignoring the Duke's son, who was panting heavily, and continued their business, maintaining their composure. Lucian could no longer bear the strain and fatigue. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the cold floor, finally losing the last of his strength. Feeling his body giving in under the weight of powerlessness and exhaustion, suddenly a loud scream was heard, and a green-haired girl ran up to the boy. Deep concern for her brother was visible in her eyes, and she anxiously tried to understand what had happened. At that moment, Rachel seemed like a ray of sunshine to the guy, an angel who had come to save his sinful soul. And so, walking along the long corridors of the majestic estate, the aristocrat became more and more convinced with each step that this girl was completely unique, possessing inimitable features. Lucian stopped in his tracks as the dark voice in his mind began calling him pathetic and predicting that he would lose everything because of a stupid girl. A rich carriage drove through the streets of the deserted city, its wheels screeching on the cobblestones, and the horses, with a loud clatter of hooves, rushed along the deserted roads. A beautiful, graceful figurine of swans and a ballerina executed in blue stood elegantly in the display case, attracting admiring glances with its refined detail. Rachel couldn't take her eyes off the beauty, her eyes captivated by the exquisite work of art that was presented in its full glory. The Duke's hands were placed on the girl's shoulders, and he tenderly asked her if she liked anything in the store, attentively awaiting her answer and expressing sincere concern. Without thinking twice, Pedro told the owner of the establishment that he would buy absolutely everything inside, demonstrating his determination and readiness to purchase the entire assortment. The servants lifted the heavy boxes and carried them into the carriage, trying to do it quickly and carefully so as not to slow down the loading process or damage the contents. With such a father, Rachel could easily live in the future in wealth, enjoying all the benefits of a luxurious life and knowing neither need nor deprivation. The girl began to persistently convince Leon that there was no need to spend so much money on purchases and that all this was quite enough to satisfy all needs and desires. With a smile, the aristocrat suggested that instead of further shopping, they go and have a tasty snack from the menu, enjoying a pleasant time with their daughter. There was a vase with a flower on the windowsill, and a light curtain protecting it from the wind swayed gently, adding coziness to the atmosphere of the room. Lucian sat at his desk, focused on writing, strictly following the schedule, and not being distracted by anything in order to complete all his tasks on time. The boy's hand trembled as a dark voice whispered in his ear that his little sister had not come to visit today, and a shadow of anxiety began to ominously thicken around his thoughts. The boy felt sick at the thought that Rachel would never come to him. At first, his parents and servants ignored him, and now even the girl to whom the Duke's son attached special importance began to avoid him, increasing the feeling of resentment. Grabbing his hair, he resisted with all his might the voice that demanded that he give up his body so that no one would dare look down on Lucian again. Suddenly, the door creaked unexpectedly, and a pair of neat shoes appeared in the doorway. Someone cautiously and timidly entered the room, breaking the tense atmosphere. It was Rachel, her face shining with genuine joy. And with a wide, warm smile, the little girl tenderly called for her brother, trying to convey to him all her love. It wasn't hard for her to guess where the boy was and what he was doing. Rewriting another text, immersed in his work and not expecting a visit. She explained that she had spent the whole day out for a walk, but had now returned and brought something tasty to make the aristocrat's day a little brighter. The little lady was glad that when she came to him, she did it not just like that, but for a reason, bringing something important and necessary that could please and support him. The girl's concern brought a sweet and warm smile to Lucian's face, like a ray of light illuminating his features. This smile was full of sincere gratitude and affection. The lovely Rachel was the only one who noticed how lonely and sad the nobleman looked. Her attentiveness and sensitivity allowed him to see the melancholy and isolation. Sitting across from the girl, the nobleman declared that he had always been here. His voice sounded vulnerable, as if he wanted to share his inner world. The girl said with a joyful smile that she had carefully and thoughtfully selected only the most exquisite and delicious dishes for her relative in order to surprise him with a magnificent treat. The jar contained exquisite marmalade, and every time it was opened, it beckoned with its aroma and taste, bringing back sweet memories. Taking a delicious piece of marmalade in her hand, Rachel, with a kind smile and playful tone, asked her brother to open his mouth and try this sweet treat. Obediently giving in to his desire, the aristocrat leaned over, with a slight ingratiating movement, and holding back a delicate smile, carefully bit into the candy that was handed to him. Such obedience caused no small surprise in the little lady, who, frozen with the jar in her hand, could not hide her surprise and delight at what she saw. Rachel was full of the intention to offer her interlocutor another sweet, but her impulse was interrupted by the delicate words of the nobleman, who politely asked her to wait a little. The guy grabbed the small table tightly, and with effort, began to drag the furniture closer to the chair, trying to place it so that everything would be convenient and comfortable. With a wave of his hand, he gestured gracefully for the aristocrat to take the seat next to him, gesturing to the empty chair with an easy grace. The happy girl sat down carefully on the chair, while Lucian took the seat opposite her, a small table between them, creating a cozy and intimate space for their conversation. Soon, a question came from the guy, who with lively interest and slight excitement inquired whether the little girl had spent the whole day in the company of her father, or whether they had separated for some time. Not noticing the catch in the question, Rachel put the marmalade on the table and, with a slight sigh, admitted that she had been walking the city streets all day in the company of the Duke, enjoying his company. Bringing her hands to her face, the little girl exclaimed, filling her voice with notes of surprise. Could Lucian really have missed her so much after all this time? When the boy heard that they missed him, his face immediately lit up with a wide and sincere smile, filled with touching happiness and deep joy. The boy's blue eyes lit up with surprise when he saw the usually emotionless aristocrat open up for the first time, giving a sincere and open smile. Suddenly, the basket overturned, and packages sealed with a seal fell out. They turned out to be store-bought sweets, which immediately attracted attention with their appearance. The upset girl jumped up from her seat, and everything she had just bought involuntarily scattered across the floor, creating a mess that further increased the feeling of annoyance. But before Rachel could drop to her knees to begin collecting the scattered things, a man's hand stopped her gently but firmly, holding her back from further action. Immediately, as if realizing his actions, the guy quickly let go of the woman's hand and took a few steps back, leaving the lady alone and trying to correct his awkwardness. Covering her mouth with her hand and smiling admiringly, the girl said that everything was fine, trying to calm the situation. When the Duke's son began collecting the scattered parcels, Rachel immediately rushed to his aid, trying to simplify the process and speed up the restoration of order. Unfortunately, after the cakes fell, they were completely ruined. The berries scattered across the floor, the cream smeared across the surface, and the dough crumbled into inedible pieces. Disappointed, the girl lowered her head and fell to her knees in front of the destroyed sweets, unable to contain her grief at the mess she saw. The older brother's soothing hand gently rested on Rachel's arms, and he told her that everything was okay, trying to calm and soothe her upset feelings. Smiling, the guy expressed deep gratitude to the lady for her efforts and the cakes she provided, emphasizing how much he appreciated the effort and attention. The embarrassed aristocrat, blushing slightly, said the word "please," and added that it was all nonsense, trying to minimize the significance of what had happened. The man promised that he would definitely get permission from his father, which made a strong impression on Rachel and surprised her as it demonstrated his respect. This way, Lucian will have the opportunity to spend more time with Rachel, which will undoubtedly bring joy and satisfaction. It will also help strengthen their mutual interaction. A memory came to mind of the two of them sitting on a bench, discussing the possibility of changing the nobleman's daily routine, planning improvements together and making new plans. Looking into the eyes of her favorite webtoon character, the girl promised that despite all the difficulties and expectations, she would wait for him, remaining true to her promise and sincere feelings. There was a ripe strawberry on her fork, so delicious and juicy that even though the cake had gone a little bad, Rachel was still determined to treat Lucian to this dessert. With a knowing smile, he opened his mouth and firmly decided that he would no longer avoid the little girl, believing that it was time to change his attitude towards her. As night fell, the moon and stars began to brightly illuminate the vast estate, their light enveloping everything around with a mesmerizing and mystical glow, turning the evening into something magical and enchanting. Sitting in her chair, Rachel couldn't shake off the haunting memory of the story's protagonist's sweet expression that kept appearing before her eyes. Suddenly, as she searched everywhere for answers, an epiphany came to her, illuminating her thoughts and bringing clarity to the confusion that surrounded the girl. Rachel was determined to see Lucian live a happy life with Noah, his lover, and was willing to do whatever it took to help them be together. The lovers' romance came to a tragic end due to a profound misunderstanding that set off a chain of events that destroyed their relationship and their dreams of a future together. Some other minor characters who also had feelings for Noah only added to their conflict, making things more difficult. Using her fingers, the lady began to count her age, which was 10 years old, and the age of her half-brother, who was 15 years old, trying to understand the difference between them. There was very little time left, as the main story of the webtoon was already beginning, and every moment was important in order not to miss the key events. The main supporting character, Oscar, was soon to appear, becoming a symbol of the couple's separation. He was a white-haired guy with eyes as red as roses, which gave him a mysterious and gloomy appearance. The man with the sword walked forward, piercing his enemies with this weapon, and behind him there was only darkness and shadow, as if the darkness itself retreated before his power and determination. Entering the room, the black-haired boy headed towards the bed, his movements confident and purposeful. He already knew what he would do next. Standing in front of the white sheets, the aristocrat held the sword in his hands, with determination, not intending to put it back in its sheath. A gentle hand in a white glove began to gently stroke Noah's head, its movements soft and soothing, as if wanting to convey warmth and care to him. With a smile on his face, Lucian asked the seated man how he could live without him, now his voice full of genuine interest and concern. Gripping the sword's hilt tightly, the man resolutely and mercilessly plunged the weapon into his beloved's body. Mentally, the nobleman wished to remain with Noah forever, awakening from an agonizing nightmare. Rachel screamed loudly, her heart pounding wildly, and her body shaking with the tremors of the deepest horror she had experienced in her dream. When the lady realized that all this was just a stupid figment of her imagination, she sighed with deep relief as if a weight had fallen from the girl's shoulders. After the tragic death of his beloved Lucian, unable to bear life without Noah, decided to follow him to heaven, preferring eternal reunion to earthly existence. The aristocrat could not come to terms with the idea that the duke's son could die, and she was determined to change the outcome of their fate, using all her power and influence to prevent the tragedy. A loving couple will finally be able to find long-awaited peace and happiness, enjoying every moment together, as if in a fairy tale where each day brings new joys and discoveries. Looking thoughtfully at the jar of marmalade, Lucian was lost in his thoughts, as if this sweet dessert could reveal the secrets of the universe to him and give him new ideas for inspiration. Rachel, dressed in her new dress and holding a basket in her hands, greeted her little brother with joy and tenderness, her eyes shining with happiness and a smile lighting up her face. Up until this point, he had been completely focused on his training, but when he stopped and saw his sister, his face literally blossomed like a flower in the sun. The girl standing next to him said in a soft voice that she had brought refreshing iced tea and fragrant cookies, hoping that it would lift his spirits and add a little warmth to his day. Loudly and confidently, the lady stated that she would only need a little time, about 5 to 10 minutes, to complete her work and return to the rest of her affairs. When Lucian's father learned of his son's request to include his sister in the schedule, he became very angry and expressed his displeasure, loudly scolding him for such a proposal. The protagonist's bad memories made him feel so bad that it greatly upset the aristocrat. She, forgetting everything, screamed, asking if everything was all right, and rushed to his aid. Grabbing the guy's hand, the girl resolutely pulled him towards a shady place where they could rest and catch their breath, giving themselves some much-needed time to recuperate. Lucian was once again convinced that Rachel's appearance was not a false impression. He realized that she really liked him, and that her feelings were sincere despite all her doubts. Sitting on a bench, the girl handed over iced tea, which turned out to be exactly what was needed in the midst of an intense workout to refresh herself. Carefully placing her hand on the boy's forehead, Rachel, worried about a possible rise in temperature, could not help but notice how this action caused a bright blush to appear on the aristocrat's face. Turning away and trying to hide his embarrassment, the nobleman referred to the hot weather, claiming that it was the weather that was the cause of his sweat and awkwardness. Lucian drained the glass of drink in one gulp, leaving not a drop, as if trying to get rid of thirst and tension in the moment. After she served him the drink, she also offered him a fragrant cookie, which the boy accepted with sincere gratitude, pleasantly surprised by this gesture of kindness. Suddenly, Amber appeared in that place, her posture expressing determination, and her gaze directed towards the mistress, towards whom the servant was rapidly heading, as if following an inescapable fate. Approaching the nobles who were sitting on the bench, the servants reported that the Duke had been waiting and looking for my lady for a long time, reminding them of the importance and urgency of the situation. Rising from her seat, the lady addressed her little brother with warmth, assuring him that she would soon return as soon as she had completed her short but important meeting with Pedro. Turning away, Lucian felt jealous of Rachel's father, who could see her whenever he wanted, while Lucian himself barely found time in his busy schedule to spend with her. The aristocrat was incredibly happy to see his sweet daughter on this beautiful day, which seemed especially magical thanks to her presence. Embracing the little girl with warm joy, he expressed his deep satisfaction, stating that the order had finally been successfully completed, and this long-awaited achievement was a source of great pride. In front stood 2 platforms covered with white sheets that fell smoothly, creating a mysterious atmosphere and foreshadowing something important. There inside the cage sat a representative of the werewolf race, a small fox cub with snow-white fur and bright red eyes, radiating a special mysterious charm. And to my great surprise, this little fox turned out to be Oscar, one of the most minor, yet nonetheless intriguing characters from the webtoon. The Beastman's primary form was bestial, but as they reached sexual maturity, they gained the unique ability to transform into human form, which opened up new opportunities and challenges for them. However, in the Leonis Empire, the Beastmen were treated with extreme disdain and cruelty, subjected to the most humiliating conditions, and deprived of basic rights and respect. And Leon was no exception. The real Rachel received a fox cub as a gift, bought on the black market, which was no different from the others, and she showed her cruelty by mercilessly abusing the animal. Despite the secrecy of his feelings, Oscar quickly fell in love with Noah, who treated the fox with warmth and affection, showing him the kindness and care that he sorely lacked. Later, under cover of night, Oscar escaped, taking with him his beloved, who was held captive by Lucian, seeking to start a new life away from his past suffering. When the Duke returned home, he believed that his lover had only gotten closer to him in order to deceive the aristocrat and use his feelings for his own purposes. And soon, Noah found himself locked up again, his freedom once again limited, and his hopes of release overshadowed by harsh reality. Thus, the man became the personal doll of the rude Duke, who locked his toy in a room where not a single ray of light reached, leaving him in complete solitude and darkness. Unable to bear the suffering, Noah drank the poison and calmly left this world, choosing the last path to liberation from torment. The frightened fox cub, huddled in fear and anxiety, hid under the girl's intense and penetrating gaze, which seemed to penetrate into the very depths of his being. Oscar's bad temper had made him unpopular with Rachel, but now locked in a cage, he evoked only pity and sympathy despite their previous differences. The girl told her father that the fox was very cute and sweet, which brought her great pleasure and joy as she sincerely enjoyed his company. Thus, the fox cub was called a cute little ball of fur, which surprised the animal itself, which probably did not expect such touching and affectionate treatment. Leaning toward her new friend, Rachel offered him her friendship, sincerely hoping that this would be the beginning of a warm and trusting relationship. At that moment, the Duke reminded her of the second gift, which was still waiting for her under the sheet, giving the situation an air of mystery and intrigue, as if promising something special and unforgettable. There inside the cage sat a magnificent falcon that could be used for hunting, radiating grace and strength, ready to become a faithful companion on the battlefield. The little lady's mouth dropped open in shock, her eyes widening in admiration as she saw the falcon, and her heart began to beat faster in joyful surprise. The lady also gave him the name Demian, which, unlike the fox's name, was normal and beautiful, giving the falcon a special charm and elegance. A tension like lightning flashed between the girl and the white beast, as he clearly expressed his dissatisfaction with the new name, which did not correspond to his previous expectations and dignity. After replacing the red necklace on the fox's neck, the girl informed the Duke that the jewel looked too tight and uncomfortable, unsuitable for such a refined animal. The aristocrat explained that the collar had been created by a renowned high-level mage to restrain the beast. He added that such a device was extremely durable and difficult to break. Unlike the falcon, who was tame and calm, the fox cub was wild and unpredictable, which could pose a threat to Rachel's life if she was not careful. Pedro emphasized that his daughter could never fully trust the cunning and unpredictable pet, as no one could predict when the fox might suddenly cut its owner's neck. Lucian walked slowly and carefully toward the suitcase that rested on the bench. His steps were measured and focused, as if he was carefully planning every move. When the training time came to an end and Rachel still had not shown up, the boy, showing care and responsibility, decided to take the suitcase himself and bring it to her so as not to leave the lady without the necessary thing. The frightened fox hid from the girl under the bed and stubbornly refused to come out, despite all the persuasion and unsuccessful attempts to force her to leave her hiding place. The lady, frustrated and tired, sighed deeply as she sat near the sofa. She was exhausted from endless attempts to coax her stubborn pet out of his hiding place. The girl also tried to lure the pet away with candy. However, the treat suddenly slipped from her little hands and rolled to the side. The beast stared at the food with its large, slanted eyes, as if it couldn't believe what was happening. Its gaze was full of bewilderment and curiosity, as if it had never seen such a treat before. Having tasted the treat, the pet ate it with great pleasure, experiencing genuine enjoyment. His sweet face lit up with joy. Without losing her composure and showing resourcefulness, Rachel offered even more candy in exchange for the little bundle obediently coming out from under the sofa and stopping hiding. The Duke's son stood at the door waiting with suppressed excitement for the moment when he would finally be given the opportunity to enter. The delicate young man could not allow himself to simply enter the lady's chambers without prior permission. Several times the hand touched the surface of the door, making a light knock as if trying to attract attention and show its respect for the rules of politeness. Lucian, in horror and fear, stopped in his tracks when he heard a loud scream. His face distorted with fear, and he froze as if caught off guard, not knowing what to do next. The future Duke, his face deeply troubled, rushed into the room. He asked his sister anxiously if everything was all right, his voice trembling with emotion. There, inside the room, a lady sat on her knees, lost in her thoughts, and next to her lay an animal through whose body electric discharges ran, creating an ominous glow. Trembling with pain, the animal made pitiful sounds that touched the soul and evoked deep compassion. Mercilessly, with malice in his eyes, the boy grabbed the fox by the collar and lifted him into the air, intending to punish the one who harmed the little girl. The wild beast himself knew the bitter truth about how people first fed magical creatures, attracting their trust, and then mercilessly caught them and put them in cages, condemning them to captivity. And this time, the little ball of fur decided to take the initiative into its own paws and be the first to attack the person who had sheltered the animal, trying to avoid the sad fate prepared for many magical creatures. The poor creature's tight grip brought tears to his eyes, which flowed down his furry cheeks, reflecting all the pain and despair he was experiencing at that moment. Suddenly, Rachel intervened, jumping up to her brother and pleadingly asking the boy to let the animal go, trying to prevent further suffering for the innocent creature. With a pitiful expression, the lady explained that the fox had simply been startled when she had suddenly touched him. Her voice was full of compassion and a desire to protect the poor creature from further harm. In the end, the aristocrat's son, accepting his sister's request, agreed to release the fox, but unable to contain his outburst of emotion, was about to throw it out the window. Fortunately, the nobleman was stopped at the last moment by the girl. A convincing argument for the aristocrat's son was that these animals, like all the others, were under the patronage of the Duke himself, whose word was decisive in this house. As soon as the fox was free, he immediately ran under the bed, hiding from the world and trembling with fear, as if he was looking for shelter and safety there. With a smile, the lady added that these animals, being defensive by nature in the future, when they grow up, will protect her from adversity and dangers that may threaten. With his inimitable beauty and self-confidence, the future Duke made a solemn promise that he would always protect the little lady like a true knight. With words filled with subtle humor, the girl noted that her brother would have more to do than just being a bodyguard when he inherited his cruel father's title. Moreover, the little girl was worried about why Lucian, who suddenly showed unexpected and even extraordinary attention, chose this particular moment to visit the sweet lady. The man, pointing to the suitcase, calmly explained that this suitcase was peacefully located by the door, calmly awaiting its time. A happy Rachel thanked the aristocrat for his kindness, expressing deep appreciation and sincere gratitude for his attention. When asked if he was going to leave, now Lucian replied that he couldn't stick to his daily routine because he was worried about the possible threat of werewolves who might harm the maiden. Green candies like small emerald jewels scattered across the floor, leaving a bright trail behind them and creating a picturesque chaos in the room. This drew attention to the furball, whose ears were visible, creating a curious and almost cute contrast to the background. The little animal was extremely unhappy with its new and strange name, which seemed unfamiliar and inappropriate to it. The animal's gaze was full of disappointment when it looked at its new owner. The falcon bored drew attention to himself by making a long and expressive kurlik sound, which immediately made those around him pay attention to him. The girl, noticing the bird, decided to show kindness and tenderness by gently reaching out to pet her feathered friend. The gentle touch was intended as a sign of friendliness and care. A bowl of chicken legs was carefully placed on the floor for the pets to eat, serving as food to satisfy their appetite and ensure proper nutrition. The fox's mouth watered at the sight of the meat, and his eyes lit up with delight. He eagerly awaited the moment when he could enjoy this delicious treat. Rachel, kneeling down, was filled with joy at having met her new friend's demands and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The aristocrat noticed that first, the lady was distracted by her father, and then by the animals, which ultimately led to her not giving him her full attention. The aristocrat's cold gaze betrayed his displeasure. Having decided to distract the duke's son, the lady suggested that he have a snack and rest, thus offering a pleasant pastime that could at least slightly improve his mood. A plate of grapes was placed on the table, and the girl asked her brother to at least eat that before returning to his studies. After all, a tasty snack would help him regain his strength and distract him a little from his studies. A green berry accidentally fell into Lucian's mouth, and he, with his mouth open in surprise, involuntarily stared at the hand of the lady who seemed to be involved in this unexpected event. Laughing, Rachel asked her brother to open his mouth as if he were a little airplane about to land, trying to make the eating process more engaging and playful to cheer him up. The obedient boy opened his mouth and, sitting on the sofa, enjoyed every moment, enjoying the playful mood and attention of his sister. Dressed in comfortable walking clothes, Rachel stood in front of her pets, holding a plate of treats in her hand, her attention focused on the adorable creatures. As they prepared for the competition, they stood in a stance full of determination and eagerness to outdo each other. Each of them was determined to win, and the tension was palpable in the air. The plate was carelessly thrown aside, and the animals immediately rushed towards it, each of them trying to get to the toy first. The bird deftly grabbed the circle with its sharp claws, instantly securing it in its tenacious paws, as if demonstrating its dexterity and skill. Proudly, Rachel proclaimed that Demian had won the competition, her voice full of pride and satisfaction at achieving his well-deserved success. As a reward, the animals were given a candy, which became a symbol of their success and efforts. Each of them, having received their share of sweets, was delighted and happy, feeling the recognition of their efforts. Unexpectedly, Lucian joined them, showing obvious indifference as he watched the girl's interaction with the animals. Noticing her little brother approaching, the lady turned to greet him warmly. Her face lit up with a kind smile, reflecting the joy of his presence. With a smile on her face, Rachel suggested that the aristocrat try his hand at training the animals, inviting him to join in on the exciting activity. Seeing a person's favorite toy in their hand, the animals immediately prepared to flee, their eyes lit up with excitement, and they began to fidget nervously, waiting for the moment when they could rush for the treasured thing. With one swing, Lucian threw the plate so far that it quickly soared into the air and disappeared among the clouds, leaving only a trace in the sky and the surprised glances of those around. At that very moment, the pets rushed towards the plate, competing with each other, each animal trying with all its might to get ahead of the other in this exciting race. Having disposed of his competitors, the boy invited the girl to retreat to the shade. He kindly offered her a rest in a quiet place to recuperate. Sitting down on a bench, the girl began telling the janitor about the bird and the fox, chatting incessantly about their hobbies and amusing habits. She described in detail their habits, interests, and every little detail. But Rachel was soon interrupted by her brother's cold voice, who informed her that the lady was currently with him and she should focus on communicating with him rather than endless stories about pets. The girl stared in surprise at her brother, who froze mid-sentence, and her gaze was full of incomprehension and bewilderment at the fact that he suddenly stopped speaking. But then, their conversation was interrupted by a fox who was running with a disc in his teeth, attracting the attention of everyone around with his fast-running and playful mood. Suddenly, the falcon crashed into its opponent, trying to snatch the toy away. A powerful blow and swift movement were aimed at returning the coveted thing. Rachel immediately rushed to the pets to resolve their dispute, trying to quickly calm the tense situation and restore peace between the rival animals. Embracing the werewolves, the lady warmly asked them to calm down, promising that they would both receive a reward. Her words were full of concern and a sincere desire to reward them for their patience and obedience. Lucian watched their interactions silently, his cold gaze fixated on every movement, revealing undisguised irritation and dissatisfaction with what was happening. Suddenly, they were joined by the Duke and his faithful maid Amber, who greeted their daughter with genuine hospitality and sincere warmth. Lucian, feeling increasingly uncomfortable, approached his father, who, completely oblivious to him, was completely immersed in the joy of how much the animals pleased the ladies. Rachel agreed with the aristocrat's words, calling the pets obedient and cute, which emphasized her agreement and consistency with his opinion about them. The man returned his attention to his son, only when he realized it was time for training. Irritated, the nobleman asked the boy why he hadn't listened and started the lesson on time. Pedro pressed him on how he expected to become heir if he didn't even have the basic self-discipline necessary to carry out his duties. Unable to bear the pressure, the girl defended her brother, explaining that he only missed the training session because he was very worried about her and wanted to make sure she was okay. The father merely smiled in response to his daughter's sweet reaction, and without losing his authority, ordered his son to return to the training area, reminding him of the importance of discipline and perseverance. While the man was eager to spend his free time in Rachel's company, enjoying every moment of their communication and immersing himself in an atmosphere of relaxed and sincere interaction, he suggested that she go out and buy some new toys, and before that, go with Amber and change into a new outfit to create a fresher and more stylish look for their time together. Disappointed that she had not been able to spend more time with Lucian, the girl waved goodbye to her brother, expressing her sadness and regret at the brevity of their meeting. Secretly, the boy also dreamed of spending time with the lady away from strangers in a cozy and secluded place where they could enjoy each other and immerse themselves in an atmosphere of intimacy and peace. Their hands tenderly intertwined would create a feeling of deep closeness and mutual warmth, as if an invisible thread connected their hearts. With 2 ponytails on top of her head, the girl was unable to make the most important choice in her life, as her attention was scattered and the decision seemed too difficult and confusing. We were faced with a choice. Choosing the color of the pet's bed. Each shade had to take into account both aesthetic preferences and the pet's comfort. The Duke politely inquired whether his daughter liked the things, to which she replied in the affirmative. In response to his interest, she expressed a desire to give the fox a gift. Without further ado, the aristocrat, with a slight smile, informed the shopkeeper that he was planning to purchase 2 items at once. This news genuinely delighted the shopkeeper, who was pleasantly surprised by such a generous decision. Pedro, with determination and deep affection, said that he was ready to purchase everything that his precious and beloved daughter desired in order to see her happiness and satisfaction. As a result, a whole mountain of products appeared on the table, from which they chose exactly those that corresponded to their preferences and plans. When asked if they would continue to look for other products, Rachel shook her head, insisting that this quantity was sufficient and no further searches would be necessary. With a kind smile, Pedro invited his little daughter to return to the cozy carriage to continue their exciting and joyful journey through the picturesque surroundings. The lady herself could not believe that such a kind and sympathetic man could become a cruel tyrant towards Lucian, as it seemed absolutely incredible and inconsistent with his character. The carriage with the coachman in front moved slowly forward, passing by picturesque landscapes where nature spread out before the eyes, amazing with the beauty of flowering meadows and green forests. The girl thought that it would be much better if the Duke treated her with the same care and respect as his son, because this would avoid injustice. Noticing the strange expression on the girl's face, the Duke asked with concern how she was feeling and if she needed anything to make her feel better and more comfortable. In her thoughts, Rachel firmly ordered the aristocrat to be kinder to Lucian, hoping that this would change the attitude and bring more fairness to their family relations. However, in reality, fearing anger, the girl awkwardly said that enough was enough, trying to avoid conflict and remain calm. Laughing into his hand, Pedro again compared the lady to her father Liam, noting how similar they were in their mannerisms and personalities, which only emphasized the family resemblance and uniqueness of each of them. The man also admitted that by showing kindness to the girl, he was thereby repaying the debt his heart owed to an old friend who had once been a loyal ally. Hanging her head in disappointment, Rachel reminded herself that she was only a replacement for her father, and that the care she was receiving was not for her, but for someone else. Under the rays of the setting sun, the estate delighted with its exquisite beauty, illuminated by a warm golden light that gave it even more charm and grandeur. The maids walking along the corridors of the house discussed their mistress's new pets, animatedly sharing their impressions of how they had adapted to their new surroundings. Moreover, Rachel looked incredibly cute while playing with the werewolves. Her smile and joy were so infectious that they attracted the attention of everyone around her. All this time, the Duke's hot-blooded son was upset by how much time his little sister spent playing with animals instead of spending it with Lucian, who also deserved attention and companionship. The little lady spent the entire day with the pets, morning lunch and evening completely immersed in caring for and playing with them, enjoying their company and affection. Although considering how often the boy himself had previously avoided communication with the little girl and shown indifference towards her, such behavior was quite predictable, and there was nothing unexpected about it. The boy stood in his place, his shiny shoes resting on the cold tiled floor, creating a contrast between his neat appearance and the stark simplicity of his surroundings. The darkness appeared in front of the boy and announced that his friend had new toys. The scary voice was full of discontent, as if this was another reason for concern. He mockingly called his master just another doll that sweet Rachel played with, emphasizing his disdain for how easily she could manipulate those around her. Lucian easily crushed the shadow with his foot, saying that he didn't care who he was, to the girl showing that he didn't care what the little girl thought of him and he wasn't going to give it any importance. According to the nobleman, the whole essence of the problem lay in wild animals, which he considered the main source of threats and all the troubles that arose. The evil pets were simply biding their time when they could abandon their pretentious manners and finally attack the defenseless Rachel, against whom they had long harbored a grudge and were preparing for the decisive blow. As he walked further down the corridors, the boy decided to always stay close to the lady so that he could come to her aid at any moment and protect her from possible threats. At that moment, the girl was happily showing her friends the new purchases she had made earlier in the city. Her face beamed with pleasure as she shared her finds and surprises with them. Taking one of the boxes in her hands, the lady invited the falcon to open it and see what was inside, awaiting with interest his reaction to the contents. The white fox thoughtfully and with obvious interest slowly emerged from his hiding place to carefully examine the jar of sweets that had attracted his attention. When asked how he managed to steal the candy so quickly, the fox replied by tilting his head and looking at her with an innocent, pleading expression that was so touching and charming. The girl tried to explain to her not very smart charges that eating too many sweets is extremely harmful to their health, carefully explaining that overeating can lead to unpleasant consequences. Unable to contain her sincere affection, the little lady gave in to the gentle requests of her pets, and despite all the warnings, decided to give each of them one candy. Full of happiness and joy, the pets turned to their owner with sincere delight and gratitude, expressing their deep appreciation and admiration for the kindness shown, which made their day special. A memory came to mind that the real Rachel from the story had not shown any particular hospitality towards werewolves, and her attitude towards them was far from warm and friendly as one might expect. While the world traveler earned the respect and love of those around her, her own behavior towards werewolves was in stark contrast to that image of a noble lady. With a warm smile, Rachel confessed to the pets that she was sincerely glad to meet them and get to know them, expressing her satisfaction and admiration for the fact that fate had brought them together. The Duke's son stood before his father in his study, awaiting punishment for his disobedient and willful behavior that had led to this stern conversation. Standing before Pedro Lucian, with deep emotion and trepidation in his voice, uttered the only request that was the most important in his entire life. Every word he uttered was filled with sincere feeling. He begged his strict father to take some time out of his busy schedule so that he could arrange a meeting with Rachel, who was incredibly important and meaningful to him. The stern man firmly stated that his son should not even think about such a request, while emphasizing that a meeting with the girl was completely unacceptable and not subject to discussion. The explanation that the boy wanted to protect the girl from werewolves had no effect on the Duke, who despite all the arguments again categorically refused the request without changing his decision. A girl dressed in comfortable pants and a sweater announced that a competition would be held today in which the winner would be the one who brought back the most loot. The animals listened attentively as it was announced that the prize would be the best quality meat. They were already eagerly dreaming of the opportunity to try this delicacy, imagining its taste and aroma. The girl loudly announced the start of the competition, confidently pointing her finger forward and forcing everyone gathered to begin active actions and preparations for the competition. The werewolves immediately rushed forward, eager to start the competition as quickly as possible and demonstrate their skills in order to win the prize and demonstrate their dexterity. While the other competitors were immersed in the action and striving to show their best results, Rachel was more interested in what Lucian was doing now. Suddenly, as if by magic, a boy appeared out of nowhere, as if he had somehow heard the girl's words, and succumbing to this invisible attraction approached her. Joyfully, with a mischievous smile on her face and shining eyes full of happiness, the lady walked towards her brother. The feminine steps were light and quick from excitement and anticipation of the meeting. The boy looked away, trying to hide his true feelings, and with a forced smile said that everything was perfectly fine. However, his voice, trembling and tense, betrayed hidden anxiety and concern. Curious, the aristocrat asked if she needed anything, as she was genuinely concerned about her condition and wanted to make sure that everything was okay. But then she was stopped by words that sounded like forgiveness, causing her to freeze in anticipation and think about what this could mean for her further actions. Lucian sincerely apologized for failing to get his father's approval regarding the day's schedule, which unfortunately prevented the inclusion of such an important meeting with Rachel in the schedule and disrupted the carefully laid plan. Pleased that the guy had not forgotten about her, the girl said with a smile that she was ready to wait as long as it took, without experiencing the slightest worry. Their hands intertwined like two loving winds, uniting in a soft and tender gesture that spoke more words and emotions than any confession. Since it would take some time for the cubs to return, Rachel suggested that he walk to the training grounds and wait there so as not to waste time and create unnecessary delays. The training area was a vast and spacious space, ideal for any kind of training, with a variety of weapons neatly displayed in spacious areas. Modestly, and with a slight emotion in her voice, she asked her brother not to forget to come and pick her up after a tough training session, hoping for his support and understanding in this difficult moment. Lucian remained silent for a long time, lost in thought about the request, trying to evaluate all its aspects. Finally, with a soft and warm smile on his face, he gave his consent. Soon, the girl said goodbye to her brother, leaving him alone, and immersed in his thoughts and going about her business, left him to reflect alone. Secretly, he harbored only one deepest desire: for the werewolves to finally leave their domain and go away, leaving her alone to enjoy some long-awaited peace and quiet. And so the little girl, overcome with anxiety and in search of consolation, quickly ran to him, hoping to find long-awaited peace and tender support in the warm embrace of his little brother. As if suddenly awakening from a deep sleep, Lucian suddenly stopped in his tracks, amazed and puzzled, not understanding where such unexpected and confusing thoughts had come from in his mind. Grasping the sword with a firm grip, the boy firmly decided to do everything possible to become the heir to the throne as soon as possible, overcoming all obstacles and difficulties on his way to his goal. With a brandished weapon, the aristocrat decided to radically change his daily routine, introducing new goals and objectives into it that would correspond to his ambitious plans and desire for greatness. The doll meant to hone skills was shattered with a roar, shattering into pieces under the powerful impact that left the wood a useless shard. Rachel raced down the narrow path, her steps light and quick, the wind rushing past her, only highlighting her determination and focus. Not seeing her pets, the lady sat down on the bench with concern, thinking that she should have poured water for the animals in advance so that they would not feel thirsty in her absence. Suddenly, a loud squeak was heard, and a fox cub appeared in sight, running away from a huge angry boar that was menacingly advancing on him, creating a dangerous and tense atmosphere. Rachel stared at the scene in horror and terror, her eyes wide with shock, and her mouth hanging open in shock, unable to take her eyes off the stage. A loud cry attracted the attention of the aristocrat, who, interrupting his physical exercises, immediately turned his gaze towards the source of the sound, realizing that something important had happened and required immediate intervention. The vicious boar kept pace with the fox, relentlessly pursuing him with terrifying persistence. Every step the beast took was filled with fury and menace, and it seemed the poor fellow had nowhere to hide from this inescapable danger. The girl screamed, overcome with deep fear for her beloved pet. A female voice full of despair and alarm pierced the air, attracting the attention of everyone nearby. Lucian suddenly and fearlessly appeared before her, determined to protect the little child from the ferocious beast. The guy firmly ordered Rachel to immediately run away as far as possible so as not to expose herself to danger while he dealt with the monster. The boy himself was determined to protect his sister. His determination and courage were evident in every move. He was ready to do whatever it took to ensure her safety regardless of his fears. Lucian himself could not recall anyone ever calling him in a warm, caring voice. It was so unexpected and touching that he had no similar experience in his memory. The frontal beast, full of aggression and clearly intent on causing pain, rushed straight at the aristocrat, radiating menacing malice. Rage and intent were evident in its every movement. A dazzling golden magic shone around the sword, spreading through the air like a shimmering waterfall. This magical glow filled the space with a thrilling atmosphere, imbuing the weapon with a mystical aura. With one swift swing, a crushing blow was dealt to the boar, which like lightning struck its target with impressive accuracy and force. The stricken beast fell to the ground with a dull thud, letting out a long sigh, as if expressing its painful surprise. It remained motionless, completely immobilized by the force of the blow. In the dense forest stood Rachel, calling out restlessly for her brother. Her voice filled with anxiety and urgency as she searched for him, feeling a growing sense of unease. A trace of blood remained on the aristocrat's cheek, and slowly, with difficulty, he turned his head towards the lady. His face reflected determination and courage, despite the wounds, and his gaze full of firmness was fixed on her. At that moment, he looked strikingly like a nobleman from an ancient novel who, fighting with his enemies, won the battle and locked his opponent in a cage. A falcon soared swiftly across the clear blue sky, majestically flapping its broad wings. Its graceful movements and confident flight created a sense of freedom, filling the air with a feeling of lightness. Upon noticing the boar and its owner's brother, the bird's eyes widened in shock and surprise. It was immediately obvious that it was astonished and stunned by the unusual sight. The worried boy pressed himself tenderly against the girl, anxiously asking about her well-being. His voice was full of concern and excitement, reflecting deep affection and a desire to make sure she was okay. Having expressed her sincere gratitude for the help and rescue, the girl suddenly noticed a deep wound on her brother's arm, which immediately attracted her attention and caused alarm. Tears glistened in the girl's blue eyes, caused by deep fear for the wound on the boy's skin, which she noticed in the light of the sun illuminating their faces. Grabbing the aristocrat's hand, the little girl led him forward so that she could stop the bleeding and bandage the patient's wounds, trying to ease his suffering as quickly as possible. Rachel asked her children to quickly pack up and come with her, her voice soft but firm, as if she were delivering an important message that required their full attention and participation. Lucian, seeing such concern, only smiled in response. His face lit up with genuine pleasure. The boy was touched by how someone showed such warm and attentive care for him. Sitting at her mistress's bedside, Amber inquired with deep attention and sincere concern about the aristocrat's condition, trying to create an atmosphere of comfort and support during this difficult moment. Rachel sang an ode to her brave brother, who, like a true hero, bravely saved the princess from the evil boar, demonstrating incomparable courage and selflessness. This time, the maid could not help but admit that the duke's son had shown himself to be a truly useful and noble man, whose qualities and assistance had earned sincere respect. Upon learning of her brother's wounds, the girl lowered her head in deep sorrow, experiencing a painful sense of guilt for the plight of her favorite. She constantly drew parallels between her past life and the life of the story's protagonist, carefully comparing every event and choice, discovering that they both had experienced unhappy childhoods filled with suffering and hardship. The only thing that consoled the lady was the realization that if Lucian found his happiness, then she would be able to share this well-being with him and perhaps find her own share of joy. However, the sight of Lucian with blood on his cheek made one wonder if those marks could be hiding something much more serious and disturbing than just physical pain. At that moment, he looked remarkably like his future self, one who had mercilessly destroyed his enemies and become a tyrant, leaving only fear and destruction in his wake. The girl's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden voice that said her name with a gentle, insistent sound, abruptly bringing her back to reality and interrupting the flow of deep and absorbed thoughts. It was Pedro who suddenly burst into Rachel's chambers, showing obvious concern and deep anxiety for his daughter's condition, and eager to find out as soon as possible how she was feeling. The lady hurried to approach her worried father, who had approached the bed with alarm, and with a soft, soothing voice tried to calm the man, assuring him that everything was under control. With deep sadness, the Duke muttered that he would not be able to calmly look into Liam's eyes in the next world, tormented by the thought that he had not lived up to his expectations and hopes. Moreover, the Duke had already been told by Lucian about the danger of werewolves and the need to take immediate measures to eliminate them in order to prevent further threats. With deep horror, Rachel realized the true meaning of the aristocrat's words. He was going to send her beloved pets to heaven, which caused a wave of grief and anxiety in her heart. Therefore, without wasting a minute, the girl called the man and asked him to personally deal with the fox and the falcon in order to prevent any possible trouble and ensure the safety of the animals. She also wanted to take full responsibility for her pets, and the Duke, appreciating her determination and readiness, agreed to such conditions, being ready to trust his daughter's judgment and actions. The little girl also asked to meet her brother, who so bravely saved her, to express her gratitude and share her emotions and experiences with him. The man pondered Rachel's words as she joyfully recounted her brother's heroic deed, vividly describing every detail of his courageous act and taking great pleasure in the memories. He eventually agreed to give him a rest, which deeply surprised the girl. The Duke was usually strict with his son and rarely showed such flexibility and understanding. The rest of the reward was up to the lady herself. Her mouth hanging open in shock, she already knew exactly how she wanted to reward her brother for his brave act. Lucian silently put on his black vest, lost in thought. Every movement he made was precise and confident, reflecting his inner concentration. He was thoughtfully pondering Rachel's well-being. At that moment, someone knocked on the door of the room, breaking the deep silence and interrupting the guy's concentrated thoughts. The sound of knocking attracted his attention. Turning towards the stranger, Lucian nodded and gave his permission to enter, expressing his willingness to meet and listen to the one who had violated his privacy. It turned out to be a servant who had come to convey the Duke's words about the cancellation of the afternoon schedule and changes to the Duke's son's schedule, including a day off for him. Frustrated, the boy lowered his head secretly, hoping that behind the knock on the door was the little lady he had been waiting for. The servant also reported that Pedro was expecting his son for dinner. This unexpected news caused the boy considerable surprise, since he knew of his father's dislike for him. The houseworker invited his master to accompany him to the dining room if he was already ready and prepared, providing the opportunity to quickly move on to dinner and begin the meeting in a comfortable setting. Lucian considered the possibility of having Rachel with him during dinner, imagining how her presence might change the atmosphere and add a special warmth and comfort to the moment. The boy followed the servant, deciding that this time everything would be different from the previous dinner together. Now he was determined not to ignore his sister, but to pay attention to her. The darkness followed the boy relentlessly, like an ominous shadow, constantly reminding him of its power and calling him its heir and descendant, which gave his path a special dark significance and a sense of inevitability. The Duke's family gathered around a large table, which was generously laden with a variety of exquisite delicacies. The family members enjoyed sampling each dish. The man watched his son out of the corner of his eye, surprised by his good mood. He couldn't help but notice how the son's joyful expression and his lively demeanor contrasted with what he expected to see. Lucian was interrupted from his meal by the voice of a nobleman calling his name, interrupting his concentrated enjoyment of the meal and calling his attention to an urgent matter or need. The boy received approval from Pedro, who praised him for his bravery and saving his sister, expressing admiration and pride for his brave actions, which filled his heart with joy and satisfaction. The Duke also reiterated that he would be giving his son a day off and taking a day off from his schedule, emphasizing his willingness to be flexible in the interests of family well-being and relaxation. Bowing his head in deep politeness to his father, Lucian expressed his sincere appreciation for the generosity shown, thanking Leon's. After this, the boy turned to Rachel, and with a sincere warm smile on his face, gave her his encouraging expression, filled with genuine joy and warmth. The aristocrat added that he had one more important piece of news that he intended to announce, drawing the attention of everyone present and creating an atmosphere of anticipation and excitement. A royal ball will soon be held at the Imperial Palace, to which the Duke's entire family has been invited. This event promises to be significant and solemn, filling all family members with anticipation and excitement. Clutching her cheeks with her hands, the girl began to squeal with joy, realizing that in the future, she would be able to attend balls with her brother and sit next to him at the dinner table. Her delight and happiness were indescribable. She quickly began questioning the men of the Leon family, trying to find out if this was true, and eagerly awaited confirmation that could further strengthen her joyful expectations and plans for the future. Unable to refuse his only daughter, the Duke bowed his head with a deep sigh and an expression of tender assent, thereby expressing his full approval of the request. Rachel, unable to contain her emotions, began to laugh, and this laughter, sincere and infectious, spread throughout the room, while Lucian, standing nearby, watched her expression with delight. After this, the boy, believing that nothing could be better than the moment spent with his little sister, smiled, enjoying her company. The girl resembled a ray of sunshine. Sitting in his modest room in front of the mirror and maintaining a straight posture, Lucian looked closely at his reflection, immersed in thought and introspection. Getting out of bed, the guy began to walk restlessly around the room, in circles, not knowing what to do with his hands and mind on this free day, off which seemed endlessly empty and boring. Finally, he sat down on the windowsill, realizing that despite his attempts to avoid it, he actually knew what he wanted to do. An internal conflict and reluctance to admit it to himself prevented him from making a decision. A familiar voice filled with warmth and persistence came from behind the door, gently and persistently, calling for his brother, as if trying to remind him of his closeness in this moment of loneliness. Opening the door, Lucian found himself face to face with Rachel, who with a slight smile and irresistible grace stood on the threshold as if spring itself had come to visit him. Without thinking twice, the boy illuminated her presence with a sincere and warm smile, his eyes sparkling with joy, and he happily invited her inside, filling the atmosphere with home comfort and hospitality. Smiling with a snow-white smile that seemed to radiate light, the little lady tenderly wished him good morning, filling the moment with special charm and warmth. Sitting on the edge of the bed, the girl asked with care and attention about the well-being of the owner of the room, her voice filled with sincere concern and tenderness. She took with her a white handbag in which she placed the medicine intended to treat the aristocrat's wound and ensure effective healing. Taking the iodine out of her purse, Rachel gently asked him to hold out his hand so she could carefully and gently treat the wound. Carefully and with exceptional caution, the lady began to carefully apply the liquid to the nobleman's hand, ensuring a gentle and thorough treatment. After this, the girl, with particular care and tenderness, began wrapping the hand with a bandage, carefully and gently fixing it to ensure reliable protection. The boy sincerely thanked his sister for her warm care and attention, expressing deep appreciation for her concern for his health and comfort. Grabbing the nobleman's hand, the lady declared decisively that it was time for breakfast, filling the moment with easy confidence and businesslike determination that they could now enjoy their morning meal. The maid warned the Duke's children that the aristocrat himself would not be able to be present during the meal, as he had important matters that required his immediate attentions. The servants themselves were also busy with their own affairs, so if the children needed her, they could always ring the ring and call Amber, who would promptly respond to their request. Rachel happily exclaimed loudly that today she and her brother would be having lunch alone, enjoying time alone, and without adult interference. Suddenly, the girl's attention was drawn to the baked chicken lying on the table in front of her. A cunning plan for feeding the older boy using this delicious treat formed in her head. Pointing her finger at the fragrant dish, she enthusiastically declared how delicious it was and how pleasant it would be to enjoy this treat in the near future. Lucian, listening attentively to Rachel, stood up from his seat, put the meat on a plate, and placed it on the table in front of the girl, which caused her disappointment, since the lady expected the boy to join the dinner. Raising his golden eyes, the aristocrat offered to share the meat, looking like a caring and attentive guy who could become any girl's dream. When asked what he was planning to do today, Lucian became embarrassed and replied that he wouldn't mind spending the day with her, enjoying her company, and spending time together. Hearing these words, the girl felt Cupid strike her heart with an invisible arrow, filling her soul with warmth and happiness from such an unexpected and sincere proposal. Thinking about what they were going to do after breakfast, Rachel's expression darkened slightly, her feminine face darkening at the thought of the tasks or obligations ahead. After all, it was on this day that she was going to say goodbye to her pets, who were sitting in a cage and sadly lowered their heads, waiting for a farewell that was especially difficult for them. One of the workers, noticing the light, carefully opened the door, allowing its warm and bright light to penetrate into the dark and gloomy room, illuminating it with its rays. With his hand, He carefully took the cage in which the animals sat, awaiting their sad fate with sad eyes and an expression of resignation. After this, the man headed for the exit, carrying out his master's orders with a determination and precision that testified to his dedication to the cause. With a dull thud, the cage was carelessly thrown to the ground, causing the fox and falcon sitting inside to become terrified, suddenly jumping up and squealing anxiously from the unexpected and alarming sound. After thanking the servant for his work, Rachel stood on the porch, with her brother carefully watching what was happening and thinking about the future. Turning to her pets, the girl carefully lowered herself down to them and began to open the cage, preparing their freedom and eagerly awaiting the moment when they could go free. In an instant, all the animals rushed towards their owner to hug her, expressing their genuine affection and gratitude for her care and attention. The noble lady could not simply leave her children hungry, so she carefully and lovingly placed bowls of delicious chicken legs in front of them, providing them with a filling and delicious dinner. The girl sadly thought that this was the last time she could feed her pets, realizing that such moments, alas, would never happen again. Suddenly, the lady's attention was drawn to the magical collar on the fox's neck, sparkling in the sun and emitting a mysterious light that captivated her gaze. Touched, she thought how good it would be to remove the collar from the poor creature, to free him from this burden, and restore his freedom and peace. Seeing the deep concern on his sister's face, Lucian couldn't resist asking what was causing her anxiety. In response, the girl sadly told him about the fox cub and the problem that could only be resolved with powerful magic. The boy leaned towards his sister and offered his help, which left her shocked and surprised, as she had not expected him to decide to take part in solving such a complex problem. The boy grabbed the collar tightly, hoping to help the beast, but this only added to the poor creature's anxiety, and it began to thrash around even more in fear. Suddenly, the boy's fingers began to glow, and magic began to emanate from them, creating a mysterious glow around and filling the space with magical energy. As the magic began to spread, the thing squeezing the fox's neck began to crack and finally crumbled completely, freeing the poor creature from its torment. Covering her mouth in shock and not believing her eyes, the girl realized in complete bewilderment that her brother, whom she had never suspected until now, possessed amazing magical abilities, which he had just demonstrated in action. According to the original story, Lucian was a renowned swordsman, but not a mage, and his sudden manifestation of magical abilities came as a complete surprise to everyone. Even in the original version, when Noah asked to remove Oscar's collar, the aristocrat called a magician to solve the problem, as only a wizard could handle such a spell. Covering her face with her hands, the maiden could not believe that her actions had changed the course of events and unexpectedly intervened in the course of a matter that she could not have predicted. While exceptional individuals like Lucian might possess a variety of powers, combining mastery of both martial arts and magic, such abilities were not obvious to those around them. Rachel's thoughts were interrupted by her brother's stern voice, which suddenly sounded condemning, forcing the lady to immediately return to reality and pay attention to what was happening. The guy leaned towards the girl's face and asked her if she was now happy, showing genuine concern and a desire to make sure that her problems were solved. Having received approval, the boy smiled happily, but their moment of happiness was interrupted by a sudden cry from the poor animal. They were happy animals who, despite the upcoming farewell to their mistress, looked joyful and grateful for all the moments spent together. Sitting down next to her, Rachel began to explain to her former pets that they needed to separate to avoid angering the Duke, who might become very angry at their presence. Not wanting to leave his mistress so easily, Oscar walked around her legs, begging her with his behavior to stay and continue spending time with him. But at that moment, Demian intervened, who, following the order of his mistress, grabbed his fellow with his claws and began to carry him away to fulfill her orders. Spreading its wide and powerful wings, the majestic bird soared into the air, confidently carrying the fox cub in its claws, which it carefully carried away with it. Watching her faithful friends leave the place one after another, the girl could not hold back the tears that, like life-giving drops, flowed down her cheeks, reflecting the full depth of grief and longing for loss. Lucian excitedly turned to Rachel, to which she responded by explaining that in such a short time she had become very attached to them, feeling a deep connection and genuine affection. The men's hands, radiating tenderness and warmth, reached out to the girl to embrace her, offering protection and support. At this touching moment, when she especially needed consolation. Hugging the little girl, the boy gently asked her to stop crying, assuring her that she still had him, a loyal and caring friend who was always there and ready to support her in difficult times. As Lucian walked along the path back to the estate, he asked Rachel how she was feeling, to which she replied that everything was fine, and she was feeling well again. They stood frozen together at the entrance to the estate. Since today was a day off, they had to hurry to the training grounds to save precious time and take advantage of the opportunity to fully focus on training. At that moment, the girl's attention was drawn to a mysterious figure sitting by the window of the house and looking out. The enigmatic and thoughtful appearance was so unusual that it immediately attracted her attention and aroused her curiosity. It turned out that the woman was the Duchess, who looked at them indifferently, with Lucian not showing the slightest interest or emotion. And then an important truth dawned on the lady, which suddenly clarified the whole situation and made her realize something significant and previously unnoticed. It turned out that all this time, she had been watching her son from the window, monitoring his actions, and being constantly attentive to his life. Lucian, alarmed by the sudden stop, asked what was wrong. Rachel, feeling awkward, tried to change the subject by asking how often he saw his mother. The boy calmly replied that he had not seen his mother because she was ill, which prevented her from leaving the house and meeting with him. It turned out that the problem was not only in the guy's relationship with his father, but also with his mother, which added additional complexity to his family relationships and emotional state. Yet it seemed the Duchess had feelings for her son, as she watched every training session, closely showing genuine interest in his achievements and progress. Lucian suddenly froze in place when asked if he liked to cook. The question caught him off guard, and he paused, not expecting the topic to become a topic of discussion. On the kitchen table lay various ingredients that might be needed for cooking. In their variety, one could see everything necessary from flour to spicy spices. Putting on an apron, the girl happily announced that she and her brother would bake shortbread cookies for the Duchess to show their gratitude and make her day a little sweeter. Lucian was pleasantly surprised and a little embarrassed by this prospect, but he still gladly agreed to the lady's offer. His heart was filled with warmth from her kind gesture, and he was ready to support her endeavor. First, they began preparing the dough together. They enthusiastically mixed the ingredients, their conversations and laughter filling the kitchen with a cozy atmosphere, setting the perfect mood for the rest of the process. The next step in their culinary process was to carefully divide the dough into equal portions and then place each portion lovingly and carefully on a baking sheet. They then carefully sprinkled the cookies with almonds and chocolate chips, adding extra flavor and texture, and each one was decorated like a miniature work of art. Rachel then handed the baking tray to Amber, entrusting her with the important and responsible task of carefully placing it in the preheated oven to ensure that everything turned out perfectly and without any unnecessary complications. Now all that remains is to wait for the cookies to be ready, and then together with your brother, enjoy the result of your labor and the taste of this delicious delicacy. Very soon, a maid entered the room tenderly and carefully, carrying a tray on which freshly baked fragrant cookies were displayed, filling the air with the magical smell of freshly baked goods. The food was delicious, exuding such a mouth-watering aroma that it immediately captivated and beckoned, awakening the most pleasant taste expectations. The girl carefully decided to divide the cookies into 2 portions, keep one for herself and her brother, and take the other to the Duchess, so that she could share that moment of joy with her. Rachel grabbed the treat with her hand and offered the cookie to the aristocrat, trying to do it as elegantly and delicately as possible to emphasize her care and respect. The boy carefully broke one cookie in half, trying to do it as carefully as possible so that both parts looked just as appetizing and attractive. The boy carefully handed the sweet to the girl so that they could enjoy it together, sharing the joy and pleasure of this delicacy. Rachel exclaimed with delight that the cookies were as delicious as they were fragrant, filling her heart with joy and satisfaction from this wonderful treat. In Rachel's mind, she could only hope that the lady of the house, Lady Leon, would also enjoy the baked goods, and that the little lady's efforts would be appreciated. As the boy finished his meal, he curiously inquired about what they planned to do after finishing their meal, wanting to know what exciting or interesting events awaited them during the rest of the day. In her free moments, Rachel wandered aimlessly around the house, letting her thoughts wander freely and enjoying the peace and quiet that surrounded her like a warm and cozy blanket. When a girl had pets, They at least brightened up the dark days, a little bringing joy and comfort into the girl's life, despite all the difficulties and gray everyday life. Disappointed, the lady lowered her head, realizing that she no longer had the pets that used to bring her joy and warmth. At that moment, her attention was drawn to a hand that first gently touched her plump cheek, and then gently pressed itself against it, bringing comfort in this sad moment. It was Lucian who, noticing his sister's sadness, could not remain indifferent and tried in every way to lift her spirits in order to see her happy smile again. The girl happily remembered that the boy was always there supporting her in difficult times and giving her the confidence that she was never alone. The little girl explained that in her free time, she usually wandered around the estate without a specific goal, not doing anything special, and simply enjoying her solitude. Grabbing the guy's hand, she invited him to take a walk through the beautifully maintained garden, full of greenery and fragrant flowers, to enjoy the fresh air and spend time together. The heroine sat majestically on a soft sofa, sadly looking out the window, where a mesmerizing landscape was playing out behind the glass. The grateful lady turned her attention to the maids who brought freshly baked delicacies from the girl who had been given shelter by the good duke. The servants happily informed her that this exquisite treat had been prepared by the lady in collaboration with the duke's wife's son and was intended to please everyone present at the estate. The lady was surprised to learn that the cookies were baked by Lucian himself, as his culinary skills turned out to be completely unexpected and amazing. The lady took the cookie with her graceful hand, watching in amazement how much her son had changed recently, and she couldn't help but admire his new culinary achievements. What was also surprising was that the changes in his behavior were due to Rachel, whom he fed with a fork, which became a symbol of his transformation and new feelings. Amber carefully helped with the hair and outfit of the young lady who sat in front of the mirror, paying attention to every detail and trying to make her appearance flawless. Her green hair was adorned with a bow of a noble green shade, to which was attached a jewel, giving it a special charm and sophistication. Smiling, the maid solemnly announced the completion of all preparatory work, demonstrating the perfect result of her meticulous work. Rising from her seat, Rachel expressed her sincere gratitude to the servants, noting their magnificent work. Her outfit, made in white and blue with exquisite lace, gave her an indescribable elegance and sophistication. The girl couldn't wait for her first ball to begin, excitedly anticipating this exciting moment, which promised to be the beginning of an unforgettable adventure in the world of exquisite dance and festive atmosphere. At that moment, Lucian entered the room dressed in a formal suit, the shades of which perfectly matched Rachel's dress, and with an equally elegant bow around his neck, which completed his impeccable look. Their hands intertwined, and together they were ready to go to the ball, filling the moment with special meaning and a sense of unity, anticipating the magic of the evening ahead. Standing next to each other, they looked like a couple in love, their closeness and mutual understanding giving them a particularly touching and romantic appearance. The imperial palace, majestic and grand, stretched over several hectares and was shrouded in sparkling light. Its vast halls and magnificent gardens created the impression of a true magical kingdom. The aristocrats, previously engrossed in animated conversation and intriguing discussion, suddenly froze in anticipation and silence when the footman solemnly announced the arrival of the famous Leon family. The Duke, after a long absence, made his first public appearance accompanied by himself and his children, a handsome son and a lovely daughter who attracted everyone's attention with their charm and elegance. While the girl was beaming with happiness, the boy, on the contrary, was immersed in deep thought, and his thoughts were veiled by doubts that entangled his mind. He heard and saw the other nobles whispering among themselves, casting meaningful glances at him out of the corner of their eyes, full of hidden hints and curiosity. The darkness, like an invisible voice behind the boy's back, whispered to him that those around him hated him and considered him an insignificant heir who was not worth paying attention to. Lucian gritted his teeth when he heard that he was not recognized as a worthy successor to the Duke's line, and trying his best to hide his inner anger, he maintained an outward calm. Pedro was completely absorbed in the conversations and activities of his workmates, but Rachel noticed a sharp change in her brother's behavior, which could not help but alarm her. Turning with a warm smile to his beloved daughter, the Duke gently warned her that he would be away for a short while, but promised that he would return soon. Turning to her brother, the girl invited him to walk around the room, but froze mid-sentence, noticing the expression on his face and realizing that something was wrong. The aristocrat's expression was immersed in darkness, and his eyes stared into emptiness. The boy was absorbed in deep, invisible thoughts and inner darkness. Suddenly, the young lady was joined by a slender girl with a luxurious shock of red hair and clear green eyes that seemed to glow with a living fire. With a slight curtsy, she introduced herself as Valisa of the Marquise Bernieu family, her voice full of confidence and her manners of refined nobility. The two ladies began a conversation that developed quite quickly, as if they were under the enchanting influence of the magic of communication, and were eager to exchange a multitude of ideas and emotions. Frustrated, the girl explained that no one wanted to keep her company because of her young age, so the lady patiently waited for someone like her to appear. When the girl suggested that Rachel go and look for her peers, the lady froze, not knowing how to respond correctly, faced with an unexpected choice. Lucian made her choice easier by suggesting that she simply go for a walk with another noble lady, thereby relieving Rachel of the need to make a decision. The boy himself turned away and walked towards the exit, intending to walk along the streets and breathe some fresh air to clear his head a little. Rachel stood frozen in the hall, motionless, watching intently as her little brother walked away towards the exit. A sad feeling came over her, and she watched his retreating figure with longing. Only the moon illuminated the dark sky, spreading its silvery rays across the night sky, and giving the surrounding world a mysterious and calm appearance. The Duke's son sat on a bench in a deserted garden, surrounded by the scent of flowers, and greedily gulped in the fresh air, trying to calm down and rest from the worries of the day. The voice continued to speak to the boy, reminding him of how the others in the room watched his every move with predatory eyes, waiting for him to make a mistake. Lucian was nothing without his title of heir, since his personality and importance in society were entirely determined by this status. And the vile Rachel, after having taken possession of all the riches, will finally reveal her true nature and will only laugh meanly at her stupid brother enjoying her insidious victory. A figure emerged from the shadows and gently embraced the boy's face, whispering to him to accept her as the greatest mage of the last millennium. She assured him that together they could change this world and avenge all the wrongs. And just when Lucian was about to agree, Rachel intervened, running excitedly through the garden toward the bench to stop the darkness from making its decision. The evil shadow vanished into thin air as the girl began muttering about how worried she was about her little brother. With a deep sense of unease, the lady set out to find him, striving to return him to safety. The aristocrat turned his head away and stated with an unperturbed expression that he was perfectly fine, but that the guy simply felt uncomfortable being in a room full of people. Smiling, the girl quickly came to a solution. Stay in the garden for a while and then come back and go home. At that moment, the boy remembered the words of darkness, which sounded like an ominous prophetic whisper, predicting that the maiden was going to take everything from him, including his title and his father himself. The sounds of music were coming from the palace, which attracted the girl's attention, causing her to become alert and turn towards the source of these enchanting melodies. She felt truly sorry that she had spent so much time carefully preparing her outfit, only to end up not having the opportunity to enjoy the dance. The girl stood up abruptly from her seat and, full of determination, declared that what was happening was completely inappropriate and required immediate change because the situation needed radical change. She extended her hand towards Milord Leon, and with a slight tremor in her voice, asked him for a dance, hoping for a moment when their hands would join in a graceful waltz. Embarrassed and somewhat hesitant, the boy extended his hand in agreement, ready to accept the offer and join in the dance. Together, they began to dance in solitude to a mesmerizing melody that created an atmosphere of intimacy and magic, as if the world around them was disappearing. At that moment, the guy didn't care at all if Rachel took everything he had. His thoughts were completely absorbed in the dance and the beautiful girl who had changed the aristocrat's entire life. The boy wanted only one thing: for the girl to always stay by his side, so that they could enjoy every moment together and support each other in any situation. Opening the window, Rachel looked out onto the street and took a deep breath of the fresh morning air, enjoying the view of the awakening city and anticipating a new day full of possibilities and adventures. But suddenly, there was a knock, and the girl, distracted from her thoughts, turned to see who or what could disturb her quiet morning moment. This man turned out to be Lucian. His appearance was unexpected. He came for his sister to pick her up and discuss important family matters that could not be delayed. Seeing how much Lucian had grown and become more handsome in such a short time, the girl involuntarily closed her eyes, surprised by his changes, and remembering what the guy was like before. The worried future Duke asked with concern in his voice how Rachel was feeling and whether she was ill. The aristocrat was worried because the baby's health was more important to him than anything else. With a smile and delight, the lady declared that it was the bright light of the guy's beauty that blinded her, leaving a delightful feeling of beauty in her heart. Lucian himself was planning to visit the salon that day, a gathering place for the children of the aristocracy to enjoy the company of his equals and discuss the latest news and events. It was also here that he was to meet the charming Noah for the first time, which added even more excitement to his upcoming visit. Waving her hands enthusiastically, the girl declared that her sweet brother should definitely make friends so as not to get bored and enjoy time in the company of his peers. She also added sheepishly that he should bring his new friend to the estate and introduce them so that everyone could get to know each other better and spend time together. Lucian, with a warm smile on his lips, assured that he would certainly fulfill this promise during the day. The man's words were full of confidence and determination. Just before she fainted from the blinding light coming from the guy, the girl realized that there was nothing left for her to regret. The nobleman no longer seemed to resemble a cold tyrant. Now he looked more like a guy with a warm and caring smile, radiating genuine kindness. Rachel silently congratulated herself on successfully completing the mission that changed the fate of the webtoon's protagonist. The girl pulled her brother by the hand, trying to get him into the salon as quickly as possible so that he could rest and recover after a long and tiring day. The only fear was that Lucian might return to his past life, and upon meeting Noah, he would put the handsome man in a toy house. The carriage with the coachman was already heading to the house of the Duke's son, and was now waiting impatiently for him to finish his business with his sister so that they could continue their journey. The couple's hands gradually separated, and Rachel slowly let go of the guy, feeling the distance between them again. The aristocrat said goodbye to the beauty as she waved goodbye, her graceful movement adding a touch of elegance to this touching moment of parting. The transport gradually drove away, and the maid stood there watching it with a slight expression of longing and regret on their faces, feeling how the moment of farewell filled their hearts with sadness. After this, the lady headed to Amber, who had already prepared everything in the kitchen, getting ready to receive the guests and complete the preparations for the reception. Rachel realized it was time to get ready for a meeting with friends and began gathering the necessary items to look flawless and make a good impression. The hand dynamically stirred the dough in the bowl, creating a light and homogeneous mass, filling the kitchen with an appetizing aroma. When the girl first baked cookies, she couldn't quite master the task, and many things went wrong. However, now, after many attempts and experience, her skills have improved significantly. The cookies were baked in the shape of cute animal faces, each one carefully decorated, and looking like they had just come to life on the plate. When the lady friends arrived, they enthusiastically admired the baked goods, unable to contain their delight at such cute and beautifully decorated cookies. The red-haired girl noted that Rachel's skills had improved significantly, admiring how her culinary skills had reached new heights. Pedro's daughter thanked everyone heartily for the kind words and praise. Her face literally glowed with joy and gratitude, reflecting her genuine pleasure at the recognition of her work and efforts. Felisa was a friend from the ball with whom the girl struck up a pleasant conversation, and their friendship continued after the event, maintaining good relations. The other girls were Aine and Serena, who also became friends with the scarlet-haired lady, joining their circle of friends and strengthening their bond. Proud of her brother, Rachel couldn't stop talking about him, constantly telling him with admiration and pride about his achievements and qualities. Gradually, the lady gained trust and established connections so that when the time came to leave the Duke's house, she would have the opportunity to find shelter and support from other acquaintances. Sitting at the table, Rachel ate with pleasure, settling herself comfortably and cozy, and savoring every delicious bite. She said to herself a warm wish for bon appétit so she could fully enjoy this meal. Just as she had seen him off, the lady greeted her little brother, standing on the street with joyful excitement, ready to greet him with genuine warmth and joy. Each of his approaches was a long-awaited and important event. Despite the servant's pleas to return, the girl stubbornly continued to stand in place, waiting for her brother's return with impatience and hope. Smiling, Amber looked at Rachel and the young gentleman, who looked like a beautiful couple in love, expressing delight and joy at their romantic communication. It was a real shock for the young lady to learn that she had been brought to a luxurious palace with the intention of marrying her to the duke's son, although the baby was still very young. Looking gloomily at the servant, Rachel asked, with a sullen expression, what exactly was hidden behind this unexpected statement, and tried to understand the true meaning of the spoken words. It was known that the lady still had an uncle among her relatives who continued the family line and was the only representative of the family line. Amber has often encountered stories of girls being adopted at such a young age solely for the purpose of subsequent marriage. In the girl's wild imagination, a scene immediately arose where Lucian was holding her in his arms, and she herself was dressed in a wedding dress and veil, holding a bouquet of flowers in her hands, like in a fairy tale romantic scenario. Rachel, in utter despair and with growing horror, screamed that such an event simply could not take place. Her female voice was filled with panic and disbelief, reflecting an internal crisis and incomprehension of what was happening. This was ridiculous, because according to the girl's plans, she was supposed to leave soon, and Lucian and Noah, meanwhile, were going to start creating something new and important together. Turning away and taking a deep breath, the lady began to assure the maid that most likely her brother held the same thoughts and opinions as she did, adding notes of confidence to her words. Suddenly, a magnificent carriage pulled up to the house, its driver deftly stopping the horses at the entrance. The wheels of the vehicle screeched to a halt, drawing everyone's attention. Lucian walked outside and was greeted by Rachel, her face glowing with happiness as she warmly approached him to greet him. Upon seeing the lady, the boy immediately smiled, and soon a stranger followed him, who, as it turned out, was a friend of the family, and was also happy to meet his friend's sister. A man with shining golden hair and eyes the color of a clear, cloudless sky stepped out of the carriage. His incredible attractiveness and presence were so impressive that they were simply breathtaking. The girl was surprised to learn that the man she was standing in front of was the same Noah, Lucian's lover, about whom there were many rumors and conversations in society. Noticing the boy's informal address to the duke's son's sister, he corrected him, emphasizing that respect and politeness should be shown to the lady. Bowing politely to Rachel, Noah apologized, explaining that the salon was usually informal. The lady was pleasantly surprised by the unusual installation, which was displayed in other places, demonstrating attention to detail and an excellent sense of style. The man responded with a smile and explained that this was how they were establishing a strong male friendship, which helped to strengthen mutual trust and understanding. The girl excitedly asked if this meant that the boy was her brother's friend, and his big eyes filled with curiosity and joy at such a possible revelation. Noah glanced at Lucian and confirmed the lady's assumption, with a smile, nodding his head, thus making it clear that they were indeed close friends. Rachel covered her mouth with her hands, unable to hold back a sigh of delight. It seemed like a true gift from fate, like a present from the gods. Having accepted her brother's friend into her family, the girl allowed him to leave formalities behind and communicate more freely, as if he had long been part of their close circle. She hopefully asked permission to call him Brother Noah, as a sign that she considered him part of her family and a close person. The boy glanced jealously at Noah, who like a magnet had attracted his sister's attention, leaving no room for doubt that he was the center of her interest. The blonde man admitted that the future duke spent all his time in the salon discussing his sister. He described how the duke never missed an opportunity to boast about her virtues and successes. Suddenly, a man's hand appeared in front of the lady, as if interrupting everything around her, and Rachel's attention was immediately captured by this unexpected gesture. In a cold tone, Lucian noted that Noah should leave, and that they could meet later, when the situation was more favorable for conversation. The aristocrat placed his hand on his new friend's shoulder and gently pushed him toward the transport, indicating that it was time to move to the designated place. The man literally began to force the resisting Noah into the carriage, clearly hinting that it would be better for him to leave and not linger, leaving his protests behind. An indignant Rachel abruptly pulled her brother away, wanting to spend more time in the company of a friend who was especially dear to her. Her desire to linger with her friend instead of going with her brother. Looking sternly at the lady, the guy leaned closer, and from his intense gaze, she immediately froze, as if frozen in anticipation of further action. With one deft movement, the nobleman picked up his little sister in his arms, carefully and confidently, as if wanting to protect and transfer the girl to a safer place. Rachel took one last farewell look at the carriage as it slowly drove away, while her dear brother headed back to their shared home. Noah waved goodbye, looking out of the carriage window, his gesture full of warm sincerity, expressing gratitude and hope for a quick meeting. When they entered the house, the girl, unable to remain angry with such an attractive man for long, pounced on Lucian with a sudden display of tenderness. Frustrated, she began to shake her head from side to side in irritation, feeling like she had once again fallen for the charm of the good-looking guy, despite her previous decisions. Soon, a variety of appetizers appeared on the table, attracting attention with their abundance and appetizing appearance. Amber, with a sincere wish, wished all the guests a bon appetit, and smiling easily left, so that they could enjoy their dishes in a calm and pleasant atmosphere. Upon returning, the girl cautiously asked her brother how he had spent his time in the salon, wanting to know how much he had liked it, and whether he was satisfied with his impressions of the time spent. Shaking his head, Lucian said that the time hadn't gone too badly, hinting that his impressions were far from negative. Rachel was dissatisfied with the lack of details. In her mind, the couple stood next to each other, smiling happily and laughing, creating the perfect image of romantic seclusion. The little girl persistently persuaded her brother to go to the salon again, to bring even more friends, emphasizing how important it was for her that their company became even more cheerful and numerous. Rachel suddenly realized that the guy had brought his friend not on his own initiative, but solely at her request. This realization came to her like a bolt from the blue. Lucian blushed in embarrassment as he was found out, the man's face instantly flushing with embarrassment as he realized his attempt to hide his true intentions had been exposed. A pixelated image suddenly appeared in the girl's head, depicting herself as the main character, completing exciting, unfinished missions. Filled with a true fire of determination, the lady decided that despite all the difficulties and obstacles, she would make every effort to ensure the best possible future for her brother. Night had already fallen, but the carriage still continued on its way, carrying with it Noah, who was still on the road despite the onset of darkness and the late hour. Looking out of the transport, the handsome man called Rachel a useful doll that will still be useful in the future, implying that her role and significance are not exhausted and will be important in the future. Sitting on the sofa in the luxurious room, the girl said with displeasure that it was extremely cruel to send her brother Noah away so quickly, expressing her displeasure at the hasty farewell. The lady demanded that he fulfill his promise to invite his friend again, but only in an official setting, emphasizing that the meeting should take place in a more formal and appropriate context. Looking at her coldly, the man asked if his sister liked the handsome man. She answered in the affirmative, clearly pleased and satisfied with her impression of him. The aristocrat added that she especially liked Noah's smile, which made a deep impression on her and left an indelible feeling of admiration. The guy, feeling jealous, shook his head, experiencing inner turmoil and uncertainty about his feelings. To reassure her brother and restore his confidence, the little girl said, with a gentle smile, that the real beauty was in Lucian's smile, trying to soften his worries and give him more peace. This caused a slight grin to appear on the aristocrat's face, who, without hiding his feelings, admitted that Rachel had not remained indifferent to his sympathies. This confession came from the depths of his soul. Suddenly, a maid entered the room politely and solemnly, announcing that dinner was already served. The servant invited the guests to the table to enjoy the carefully prepared dish in a cozy atmosphere. The table was laid out with delicious food, tender meat, fresh vegetables, and aromatic sauces that promised to make the dinner unforgettable. The Duke turned to his daughter with interest, asking how her meeting with her friends had gone today, showing genuine concern and a desire to learn all the details of her day. The girl said with a smile that everything had gone well, and everyone congratulated her brother on his excellent performance in fencing, noting his great successes and achievements. Remembering his son, Duke Pedro, added that Lucian had recently visited a salon where he met new acquaintances and spent time in pleasant company. In response to his father's question, the boy confidently replied that he had in no way dishonored the honor and dignity of the family, emphasizing his devotion to family traditions and high standards. Rachel, noticing the tense atmosphere in the Leon family, expressed her frustration with obvious concern, realizing that the atmosphere in the house had become much more tense and uncomfortable. The girl lifted a piece of meat on a fork to her mouth, thinking that at least she had managed to organize a family gathering during lunch. The only person absent from this family gathering was the Duchess, and her absence was particularly keenly felt, creating a sense of incompleteness and emptiness in the gathering. Moreover, the Duke was most concerned about when his daughter would start calling him Daddy, since this was an important moment for him, symbolizing closeness and trust in their relationship. Hearing Rachel hesitate, the man, understanding her awkwardness, replied with a gentle smile that he was willing to wait as long as it took showing patience and support in the current situation. The problem was that everyone the girl called Mom and Dad gradually abandoned her, leaving her alone and creating a feeling of loss and insecurity. Therefore, the lady was afraid that history could repeat itself with the Duke, and her fear was that she would again face the loss of those whom she had already become accustomed to calling loved ones. Sitting down at the table and picking up a notepad, the lady decided to carefully sort everything out in order to better understand the situation and organize her thoughts. In the original version of events, Lucian met Noah in the salon at a later point than in the current timeline, where their meeting occurred much earlier than expected. The man then demonstrated magical abilities that were also not mentioned or existed in the original version, adding a new dimension to the character and actions. The aristocrat had been jotting down the plot in a notebook, but now they had lost all meaning as the events of history had changed, and her notes no longer corresponded to the current developments. There was a discreet knock on the door of the lady's chambers, which interrupted her deep thoughts and drew her attention to the expected visit. Rachel quickly put on her soft slippers, jumped up from her chair, and dressed in her cozy nightgown, headed to the door to meet the unexpected night guest. Smiling happily, the girl met her little brother, the joy of meeting whom warmed her heart and filled the room with an atmosphere of family comfort. In her hands, she held a basket full of fresh grapes, which was the reason for the boy's visit, filling the meeting with additional meaning and joy. The aristocrat curiously asked Rachel if she would like to enjoy some fruit, with her offering to share the taste of fresh berries. However, he stopped when he noticed that the lady was already getting ready for bed, and he realized that her evening time was devoted to rest and personal privacy. The man was about to leave his sister alone, but she quickly stopped him, assuring him that she was not at all against the company and was glad to spend time together. Turning to the girl with a determined expression on his face, Lucian was determined to stay close, demonstrating his resolve. The nobleman quickly and deftly set about rearranging the furniture, quickly and carefully, moving the interior items to create the desired space and comfort in the room. But earlier, Rachel herself brought fruits to the future Duke, thus showing attention and care, which may have contributed to their close relationship. Having grabbed the berry, the girl felt the desire, as in the old days, to feed her favorite, tenderly asking him to open his mouth for the treat. Lucian watched his sister closely as she gradually approached him, not hiding her interest and attentive gaze. His teeth gripped the grapes tightly, wanting to savor every moment of the taste, getting the maximum pleasure from the juicy fruit. The girl praised the boy with genuine delight for his obedience, noting how attentively and responsibly he approached his duties and requests. Suddenly, hearing the noise, they immediately stopped playing and froze in anticipation, listening to the source of the sound with tension and alertness. A heavy rain began to fall outside, bringing with it freshness and renewal, refreshing the air and creating a cozy atmosphere. Quietly, so as not to disturb the atmosphere, Rachel offered to whisper a scary story into her brother's ear, hoping that it would add intrigue and excitement to their evening. The thing is, just recently, Amber told her about an ancient belief according to which, on rainy days when the sky was covered with dark clouds, mysterious gates opened for ghosts. And if you take that very path, you can see ghosts that look exactly like you, like reflections in a mirror, only with a mysterious and frightening aura. According to legend, this person will also feel the opposite emotions of his double, as if their feelings were intertwined, and he himself was experiencing everything that his ghostly reflection was experiencing. Trying to cheer up her brother, the girl approached him and said that since the ghost will say the opposite of what the person himself thinks and feels, this makes their meeting with him even more mysterious. At that moment, thunder rumbled and Rachel, startled, stopped her story, feeling the excitement and tension filling the space around them. The frightened lady clutched her head, afraid of lightning and loud sounds. The woman's face was distorted with fear, and her heart began to beat faster from the noise coming from outside the window. Memories of a past life suddenly surfaced in her mind, like fragments of long-forgotten events, brought to life in every strange sound and lightning flash that pierced the darkness. Rachel, clutching her hair with trembling hands, wanted only one thing: to forget about everything that was bothering her and to immerse herself in a world of peace far from these painful memories. On the day her parents first hit her, it was raining outside, as if the heavens themselves were regretting what was happening, giving everything an even more gloomy and inconsolable tone. The room was filled with cold darkness, and the door, like a barrier to light and warmth, gave the atmosphere an even greater feeling of isolation and loneliness. Outside, thunder and lightning relentlessly tore through the night darkness, illuminating the sky with bright sparkling flashes that created dramatic lighting. A relentless shudder began to run through the lady's body, her muscles involuntarily contracting as if from an icy wind caused by sudden fear and deep tension. The guy gently placed his hand on the lady's head and held her tightly to himself, embracing her with care and warmth, trying to convey his comfort and support to her in this tense moment. Hearing another clap of thunder, the girl clung to Lucian even tighter in fear, seeking protection and comfort in his arms to cope with her growing fear. The nobleman, noticing the horror that filled the lady's eyes, was determined not to let his sister go from his embrace, holding her tightly and carefully. Everything would have turned out differently if someone in her past life had shown her even a drop of kindness. It could have changed her fate and given her hope for a better future. Out of the corner of his eye, Lucian noticed that the magical gates of the ghosts had closed effectively, protecting them from the sudden weather and storms that had erupted outside their shelter. After this, he looked at the man who was in his arms and whom he had protected so carefully, hoping that his efforts would provide the necessary safety and comfort. Noticing that Rachel had fallen asleep, the man carefully laid her on the bed, carefully covering her with a blanket to ensure she had a comfortable and restful sleep on this troubled night. The moment the maiden introduced her to her new friend, the nobleman felt a wave of indignation and jealousy. The internal tension increased, and he was unable to hide his emotions as he watched their interaction. The only thing that somewhat calmed the guy was the fact that, despite everything, Rachel liked Lucian more than anyone else, and this thought gave the handsome man confidence that his place in her life still mattered. The girl woke up with a feeling of confusion and vague memories of yesterday, which continued to disturb her thoughts, creating discomfort and awkwardness. With a loud scream, the lady jumped up on the spot, her heart pounding wildly from sudden fear, and she looked around in panic, trying to find the source of the threat. She tried to scare Lucian with scary stories, hoping to create dark images in his mind and instill fear. But in the end, she ended up being scared by the thunderstorm herself. However, she always found it difficult to find peace and sleep on those days when the sky was covered with dark clouds, from which lightning burst, illuminating the night with bright, ominous flashes. Thanks to Lucian, who helped set the mood for relaxation, sleep came quickly and easily, as if a magical darkness had enveloped me in a lulling peace. A maid entered the mistress's chambers, offering her help in gathering her things and dressing in order to facilitate her preparation for the upcoming event. As if by magic, Amber deftly and gracefully braided her hair, every movement of her hands full of grace and lightness, creating the perfect hairstyle. A red embellishment added to her braid completed the look, and looking at herself in the mirror, Rachel expressed her gratitude to the servant for his help, assessing the result with a satisfied smile. The ruby color of the hair clip unexpectedly perfectly matched the deep shade of the little girl's eyes, creating an exquisite and harmonious combination that emphasized and enhanced the expressiveness of each element. The girl missed her pets incredibly much, who were gone, and her heart was filled with longing and sadness for those days when they were near and brought joy into her life. A worker at a nearby estate announced the Duke's arrival, which surprised the girl, as his unexpected visit had filled her with excitement and trepidation. Entering the room, the man warmly greeted his beloved daughter, asking how she slept and whether the night was peaceful, showing concern and attention to her condition. Due to the severe thunderstorm, Pedro was deeply concerned about Rachel's well-being, worrying about her well-being and trying to make sure she was safe and comfortable. Approaching the girl, he suggested that she go somewhere next week to spend time together and take her mind off her current worries. When the aristocrat suggested going into a store, the lady replied that she would prefer to visit a hot sauce shop, surprising her interlocutor with an unusual choice. With delight waving her arms, the girl explained that even a spicy restaurant would be suitable for them, emphasizing her desire to try something truly piquant. Rachel deeply missed the spicy food she often ate in her past life. Her longing to try something like that again was evident in her words and emotions. The Duke agreed to her terms, imagining how they would spend time together, satisfying their desires, and enjoying each other's company in a private setting. One of the servants with black hair and gray eyes glanced suspiciously at the nobles, showing a certain wariness and hidden distrust. As night fell and replaced day, the moon appeared in the sky, illuminating the surrounding world with a soft light and creating a mysterious atmosphere. The dove landed on the windowsill, carrying on its leg a secret letter that was carefully wrapped and intended to convey important news. Turning around, Noah told his interlocutor that he had received news from a secret servant working in the Duke's palace, and now he had important information to discuss. Rachel's overjoyed uncle was overjoyed that he would soon be able to get his niece back, which filled his heart with excitement and pride. The man was upset that the Duke had taken the girl to himself without consulting her legal guardian, which left him feeling indignant and resentful. The job of kidnapping the girl was entrusted to a dark spirit who was in the form of a secret guy known for his robberies and cunning crimes. Rachel admired the picturesque views of the streets with genuine admiration, while the Duke felt regret that he had not chosen this street for the arrangement of the residence of the nobility. They came to this place because there was a shop there that was famous for its variety of sauces and everything related to hot spices that caused a real gastronomic pleasure. If there was one thing that bothered the petite lady, it was the number of guards that surrounded them, creating an atmosphere of tension and anxiety, as if her every move was under close surveillance. The stern man ordered his servants to comb every corner and search everyone so that nothing would threaten his daughter, ensuring her safety and peace. As security, the Duke took with him 4 of his men, knights as well as a sword with which he could protect Rachel in case of danger. Together, they went for a walk around the city, enjoying every moment spent in each other's company like a happy family, enjoying their communication and the beauty that surrounded them. One of the Duke's workers pointed to the store they had been looking for so long, finally finding it among the many buildings of the city. However, Rachel's attention was drawn to the letter openers being sold by an old man standing behind a counter with a collection of exquisite and carefully crafted items. The girl tremblingly asked her father to stop and wait until she could choose a suitable gift herself, relying on his patience and understanding at this important moment. On display was a knife whose hue matched the color of the lady's and her brother's hair in a surprising way, creating an exquisite and harmonious combination that attracted attention with its unusual combination. The man asked his daughter if she liked the item, as he had every opportunity to buy it, striving to make her choice as joyful and satisfying as possible. The Duke asked the seller to provide him with 2 copies, one of which Rachel wanted to keep for herself, and the second he intended to give to Lucian to make the gift especially meaningful and valuable. The lady, with refined grace, carefully placed the newly purchased items into the elegant bag that she always carried with her, thus ensuring their safe storage and easy access for future use. Now they went to the store together, leisurely strolling along the cozy streets of the city, enjoying every moment as the city landscape unfolded before them in all its beauty. A pleasant-looking, slightly plump man with kind eyes and a warm smile greeted his guests cordially, radiating genuine warmth and an atmosphere of relaxed hospitality that instantly put everyone present at ease. Obeying his master's orders, he set off in haste to find the hottest sauces, striving to complete the task with the utmost speed and precision commensurate with the importance of the assignment. The most unusual spices were on the top shelf, where one of the bottles was ostentatiously decorated with a painted skull and crossbones, giving it a mysterious and frightening appearance. The salesman quietly whispered to the girl that this bottle contained the hottest sauce in the country, and his voice was full of mystery and caution, as if he were sharing a secret with her. Without much thought, Rachel decided to take this jar with her and asked her father to buy it, confident that this special sauce would become an indispensable part of their culinary adventures. In her mind, she was already imagining how she would offer this spice to her brother, and how he would be frightened and throw his head back, refusing to try such a spiciness that could shock him. While the merchant was negotiating the price, the girl carefully placed the purchased product in her bag, trying not to draw attention to her purchase while keeping it safe and sound. As the family left the store, Pedro suggested to his daughter that they go out for a bite to eat, hoping to spend time together in a relaxed atmosphere and enjoy delicious food. At this time, a mysterious figure in a dark cloak was watching the man and the girl from above, hiding in the shadows and patiently waiting for the right moment to intervene. Rachel and her dad were stopped when a smoke bomb was suddenly thrown at them, creating a thick fog mixed with sand in the air, obscuring visibility and plunging them into an impenetrable curtain. A mysterious silhouette appeared behind the girl emerging from the dark portal, its outlines gradually becoming clearer, revealing an ominous figure in the flickering light. The aristocrat ordered the lady to remain behind him, confident that her presence in the shadows would provide her with protection, while he focused on what was happening and took the necessary action. However, the villain managed to neutralize and tie up Pedro with the help of agents acting quickly and mercilessly, depriving him of the opportunity to resist and intervene in what was happening. He also immobilized the girl, carefully prepared a rag, and with threatening intent began to bring it closer to her, creating an atmosphere of anxiety and fear. The magician quickly applied a cloth soaked in sleeping pills to the lady's face, acting with precision and determination to quietly send the girl into a deep sleep. When Rachel lost consciousness, the white-haired wizard picked her up in his arms and, looking at the aristocrat, said that it was a real success, his voice reminiscent of a melody of triumph and satisfaction. Lucian sat at his desk, immersed in the routine of copying homework that had become an integral part of his daily life, carefully transferring each assignment onto a blank sheet of paper. The boy was concerned about what his little sister, who had recently left for the Duke, was doing at this moment. He often thought about her life and adventures, wondering how her days were going in such a distant place. When the guy spent time with her, he had the opportunity to once again feel the taste of life, experience emotions, and enjoy the simple joys of everyday existence that previously seemed unattainable. They often gave each other gifts, finding it a way to express their feelings and strengthen their bond. Each gift was imbued with thoughtfulness and care, making their relationship even more meaningful. While thinking about what to give Rachel, the Duke remembered Noah's advice to give her some beautiful trinket. This advice seemed ideal to him. The man's hand was shaking, betraying his excitement or tension as he tried to cope with his emotions and control his actions. But the little lady once said that the most valuable and desired gift for her would be a sincere smile and attention from her brother, which she perceived as a symbol of love and care. Lucian blushed as memories of Rachel filled his mind again, his face lighting up with a warm blush, reflecting the tender emotions and deep feelings he felt with every memory of her. Suddenly, the boy's attention was drawn to the security guards, and a group of people gathered near the window, creating a sense of mystery and tension in the atmosphere. Pressing his hand to the glass, the aristocrat wondered in surprise what could have happened to require the entire corps of warriors from House Leon to be assembled. He couldn't understand what had caused such a sudden and widespread reaction, and anxiety began to overwhelm him. The sufferers and knights discussed the current situation, regarding the Duke expressing their dissatisfaction and concern. They exchanged opinions and analyzed what was happening. An unpleasant realization dawned on Lucian, and his face changed, becoming serious. Worry and concern were reflected in his expression, as if he suddenly realized the gravity and scope of the situation. Mounting their horses, the men galloped off, eager to carry out their commander-in-chief's orders, the wind blowing through their hair and cloaks, and the determination in their eyes urging them on to complete a task that required quick reactions. The workers whispered quietly among themselves, discussing the fact that the owner had been attacked and expressing surprise and indignation at who could have dared to commit such a crime. Their conversations were filled with anxiety and bewilderment. The men's conversation was interrupted by an employee who hurried in and announced that a butler was needed due to Lucian's crazy behavior. The boy himself saddled his horse and raced at full speed, striving to save Rachel. His heart was beating wildly, and the wind cutting through his hair only spurred him on to complete the urgent task. The butler stood in front of the gentleman, trying to stop him, expressing concern and determination to prevent his further actions. The boy ordered the servant out of the way, threatening that if he preferred to risk his life, he should do it elsewhere. The man's voice was harsh and decisive, emphasizing that he had no time for obstacles. All the servant's words failed to persuade the boy to change his mind. On the contrary, he was even more outraged by how the man dared to command him. In a cold and confident tone, with obvious irritation, Lucian stated that the only person who had the right to give him commands and influence his decisions was his own father. Not wanting to continue listening to the endless persuasions and protests of the estate worker, the guy resolutely jumped on his horse and without a moment's hesitation galloped off into the distance. The man, surprised by what was happening, froze in place, unable to believe that the gentleman could behave in such a way. Never before had he seen the gentleman in such a state. Looking sternly at those present, the Duke declared that discipline in the order was completely lacking and expressed his deep dissatisfaction with what was happening. Such words sounded like a stern sentence. The nobleman shouted furiously at the guards, calling them idiots for allowing the kidnapper of the nobleman's daughter to escape. His anger was evident, and he did not hesitate to express his displeasure at their incompetence. However, the nobleman suddenly stopped seeing the familiar figure of his son behind him. This unexpected appearance made him freeze in place, and all his emotions instantly changed. With anger in his voice, Pedro asked what exactly the heir to the throne was doing here, and how it was possible that he was here alone, without any escort or guard like a common man. The servants, by order of the Duke, were to escort the boy back to the house. They quietly approached the heir and politely asked him to follow them. However, suddenly, bright sparks of magic appeared in the air, sparkling and mesmerizing, which formed an invisible barrier that did not allow the servants to come closer to the heir. In a show of rebellion against his father, Lucian firmly declared that this time he would not follow orders, and that his resolve would not be swayed by any persuasion or threats. Rushing into the distance, the boy heard a voice of darkness, as if it came from the very depths of the night, mysterious and ominous. This was the first time that the descendant of darkness himself addressed this enigmatic voice. Gathering his courage and feeling the cold penetrate his bones, Lucian ordered his servant to immediately find his sister and bring her back, despite all the difficulties. Evil didn't like the boy's rude and impolite tone, so he insisted that he express himself more politely and courteously. Without naming another alternative, Lucian added a request for his ancestor to find Rachel pronouncing her name with special trepidation and hope for the speedy completion of this important task. The man with long hair burning in the fire grinned with obvious satisfaction because this was his only chance to take over the boy's body and use him for his dark purposes. Rachel lay unconscious, completely immersed in an infinitely deep and unceasing sleep. Her body was lifelessly spread out on the floor as if she had passed into a world of oblivion. Soon, the girl woke up from a deafening noise and a mysterious voice that seemed to be coming from right inside her head, disturbing the silence and sleepy calm. When the little girl woke up, she found herself sitting beneath an ancient tree deep in the forest. The shadows of its mighty branches created a whimsical pattern on the ground, and the fresh forest air filled her lungs. What was also alarming and puzzling was that the kidnappers did not bother to tie either the hands or the feet of their victim, leaving the lady completely free, which seemed to add to the mystery of their intentions. Behind her, men sat around the fire, discussing with rapt attention how their master had spared no expense in hiring an expensive spirit capable of abducting the girl. Uncle Rachel, laughing merrily and clutching a bottle in his hand, responded in a demanding tone, ordering everyone to stop talking immediately so that attention could be focused on him. If you think about it carefully, it becomes clear that the man was against the adoption of his niece by the Duke from the very beginning, and this contradiction could not be hidden from a careful look. Deciding that this was the perfect moment to escape the aristocrat, quickly and silently began to leave, trying to remain unnoticed and avoid any unnecessary fuss. Trying not to get up or stick her head out of the bushes, the girl carefully examined the surroundings, constantly looking around to make sure that no one would notice and interrupt her cautious escape plan. A male voice interrupted her, stopping the lady and asking where she was going, creating a tense atmosphere in this unexpected moment. The frightened lady fell on her back, the little girl's face distorted with fear, when suddenly black boots appeared in front of her, standing motionless and threatening, as if foreshadowing some inevitable disaster. A handsome guy with blonde hair and purple eyes, with an expressive and anxious look, grabbed Rachel's hand and with concern in his voice, asked if she was trying to escape. The story featured numerous supporting characters who fell in love with Noah, each bringing their own emotions and motivations to the plot. And among them was one who could have competed with Oscar for second place. He wasn't just obsessed with the handsome guy, but was a real psycho capable of any madness for the sake of his goal. This character was a mysterious and powerful dark ruler of spirits known as Elliot Aiden, whose name evoked awe and fear, due to his ability to manipulate supernatural forces. Having returned the lady's attention to himself, the guy sternly ordered her not to ignore him and to respond immediately, emphasizing his power and demanding respect. Rachel began to stutter, trying to find an excuse, and avoided Elliot's gaze, who was watching her intently with an expression of impatience. Suddenly, the girl's chin found itself in the grip of a strong male hand, which turned her face towards him, forcing the little girl's eyes to meet his gaze. Majestically, Aiden gave a stern command to look her straight in the eye, even when she was interacting with another person, leaving no doubt in her authority and demanding full attention. The girl couldn't hide her embarrassment when she realized how stunningly handsome the webtoon's main psycho was, who was both terrifyingly attractive and mesmerizing at the same time. But then Aiden ruined everything when he compared Rachel to a terrible potato, leaving no chance for her to maintain her enthusiastic impression. The boy laughed when the lady called him snake-like, unable to contain his laughter at such an unexpected and unusual compliment, which was clearly not what he expected. Furthermore, Elliot couldn't help but laugh when he learned that she wasn't the Duke's biological daughter and genuinely believed that he would show up to save her. Deciding to change the course of events and take complete control of the situation, Rachel loudly and confidently declared that she was aware of the kidnapper's true origin, thereby attracting his attention. The confused man tilted his head to the side and asked what exactly she was talking about, not understanding how these words could be connected to the current situation or what they could mean. The mage's secret birth and childhood were filled with sadness and were carefully kept secret, like dark memories that were never meant to be revealed. When the lady mentioned that he was from the imperial family, the guy considered it fiction and nonsense, not taking seriously such an incredible and at first glance absurd statement. However, the kidnapper still agreed to listen to all the nonsense that Rachel was making up for herself, not missing the opportunity to find out what other strange and ridiculous stories the little girl could tell. The ironclad argument was the claim that the emperor had the same purple hair as he did, which in the kidnapper's opinion served as irrefutable proof of the connection between them. The boy's joking expression turned serious, and he began to listen attentively to the lady, completely concentrating on the story and taking in her every word with a new level of interest. The girl, hiding her actions from prying eyes, deftly opened the bottle she had been hiding in her bag, using only her fingers and demonstrating amazing skill and caution. With a sharp movement, the aristocrat splashed the hot sauce right into the face of the possible son of the emperor, leaving him no chance to escape the unexpected and humiliating attack. At this time, Lucian negotiated with the shadow, begging for its help in finding Rachel. He promised her everything he could, including his body, in exchange for support in this difficult and dangerous task. With fear, the boy agreed to temporarily allow the darkness into himself, realizing all the possible consequences of this decision and the risks that could arise from merging with evil. The shadow, like a harbinger of impending disaster, was merely waiting for the right moment to stealthily approach the Duke's son, ready to engulf him with its dark presence. When the guards finally found the master, it was already too late. All attempts to save the owner were futile, and there was no way to change the tragic ending. Lucian sat on his horse, his head down, and immersed in deep silence, as if trying to find solace in his own thoughtful and depressed state. As the men approached, the boy raised his head with a wild grin, and his amber eyes suddenly turned into an abyss of blackness, filled with an ominous and frightening energy. The Leon House staff froze in fear as the boy's seemingly inexhaustible magical power manifested before them. This energy permeated the air and enveloped them, filling the surrounding space with a terrifying atmosphere. The evil that had consumed the aristocrat was completely delighted by the power of his descendant, realizing that this power exceeded all his previous expectations and promised new dark prospects. However, this was not enough to fully contain the entire magical power of the mage, which exceeded any known limits and required much more space and control. However, the boy proved strong enough to resist his ancestor for a long time, not allowing him to take over his body and refusing to succumb to his dark influence. The man decided to wait until the boy grew up and gained strength. In the meantime, he decided to fulfill the boy's wish and find Rachel so that he could fulfill his part of the obligation and fulfill the request at the same time. Holding his face, Elliot staggered forward through the forest, barely moving, as if every step was a great effort. The boy loudly and angrily called the girl, who had caused him to lose the ability to see in one eye all sorts of names, expressing all his anger and disappointment. He searched for Rachel in the forest, relying entirely on his hearing, since he had lost his sight and was now guided only by sounds. The girl herself was hiding behind a tree. By chance, the girl's foot stepped on a branch, which made a loud crack, attracting attention and breaking the silence of the forest with its sharp sound. Elliot, hearing the loud crack of a branch, immediately activated his magic, unleashing a powerful and devastating blow towards the lady. His actions were aimed at avenging the harm done to her and expressing all his pent-up rage. Fearing for her life, the lady panicked and ran, trying to get away from the impending threat and find shelter from potential danger. Purple bolts of magic relentlessly pursued Rachel, forcing the little girl to hastily seek shelter as the ominous force continued to overtake her. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, red balls appeared glowing from within their bright glow, enveloping the space around, adding even more mysticism and tension to the events. With one movement, the scarlet spheres destroyed the dark magic, destroying it and neutralizing the threat, leaving behind only diffused light and remnants of magical energy. The girl tripped and fell to the ground, and a sharp pain instantly pierced her body, causing her to scream in fear. Every moment was filled with excruciating pain, leaving deep marks on her soul. Rachel was saved by a boy with white hair and bast, who, showing concern, asked the aristocrat about her well-being, offering his help in a difficult moment. The frightened lady, thinking that there might be another of the kidnappers in front of her, covered her head with her hands and, desperately screaming, begged him to leave, trying to protect herself. The stranger, realizing that Rachel was in distress and required immediate assistance, carefully and tenderly lifted her into his arms, demonstrating genuine sympathy and concern for the lady's well-being. Oscar approached his hostess with a request to trust him and go together, assuring the girl that his intentions were sincere and that their journey together would be safe and fruitful. The man's feet barely touched the ground, so swiftly and quickly did he rush forward, as if taking off on invisible wings of speed, leaving behind only a blurry trail. As Rachel studied Oscar's face closely, she was amazed to realize that in his features, she recognized her old pet, the sweet little fox who had once been her faithful friend and companion. Happy that his hostess recognized him, the boy smiled broadly, feeling joy and satisfaction filling his big heart. Deep in the forest, hidden from prying eyes, lay a mysterious cave shrouded in a captivating blanket of greenery and ancient trees, lending it a special atmosphere of mystery and solitude. Sitting down on a stone ledge, she thoughtfully reflected on how the little bundle had lived all this time, experiencing every moment in its inconspicuous but important life. It turned out that all this time, the cunning fox, possessing unrivaled intelligence and exquisite taste, had been living alongside the majestic falcon. In this unusual and captivating partnership, they found mutual harmony. After the rescuer began to complain that the owner had given the bird a normal and harmonious name, he couldn't help but notice that his own name sounded stupid and childish. Oscar, full of indignation, exclaimed that all his life he had carried within himself resentment and bitterness that tormented his soul and did not give him peace, as if the injustice of the past had never left him for a moment. Then, as a small and clumsy fox, he accidentally led a huge wild boar along with him, thereby putting the animal in a dire situation and disrupting its peaceful existence. The man began shouting loudly at the lady who had offended her pet over a minor incident that had occurred in the past, which he found completely inappropriate and disproportionate. The webtoon's main supporting character, overwhelmed with emotion and unable to control his feelings, broke down and burst into tears, unable to hide his deep pain and unspoken disappointment. Rachel raised her hand in a placating gesture to calm the agitated werewolf. Realizing that her behavior was unwarranted and inappropriate, she sincerely apologized, expressing her deep regret. At this point, the fox intervened firmly, demanding that the lady take full responsibility for her decision to tame them, emphasizing the importance of being aware of all the consequences of her actions. Suddenly, in the absolute silence, distinct footsteps were heard, and someone slowly entered the cave, disturbing the deep peace and attracting the attention of everyone inside. The girl, turning around in fear, realized with horror that the stranger was Elliot, who had come to take revenge for his grievances and sins. However, instead, she saw in front of her a tall, muscular man in black clothes with a short haircut who respectfully addressed her as a lady and called her mistress. His name was Demian, and he greeted Rachel with a dazzling white smile. His muscular body, confident posture, and charm created the image of a true, handsome man who, despite his imposing appearance, radiated genuine kindness. It turned out that the former pets who had trained extensively were ready to meet Rachel. They had worked hard to improve their skills and show how much they had changed and grown. The boys were so similar to the animals they could transform into that their appearance and behavior resembled the living creatures they once were. With a smile and tears in her eyes, Rachel admitted that she missed them very much. Her words were full of sincere tenderness and longing that she could not hide. Suddenly, the girl's stomach began to rumble, making loud sounds that clearly indicated that hunger had made itself known and required immediate attention. The embarrassed lady quickly grabbed her stomach, trying to hide the awkwardness and discomfort caused by the loud rumble that attracted the attention of everyone around her. The animals did not waste time thinking, and without hesitation immediately rushed to get food for their mistress. It was as if in their youth they had competed to see who could get food the fastest, and now they were competing again for the honor of satisfying their mistress's needs, striving to show off their skills and devotion. Left alone, the aristocrat felt her anxiety gradually subside thanks to the care and attention of her pets. Their presence and devotion relieved her, anxiety filling her heart with warmth and peace. Suddenly, a purple magical portal appeared in the sky, sparkling with a mysterious light and creating a feeling of magic and strangeness. Lucian teleported into a dense forest, and the moment he materialized, the spirit that had previously resided within the boy exited his body, thus freeing him from the invisible and tormenting influence. He sensed a strange magical aura emanating from a distant cave, mysterious and alluring. Determined to investigate the source of this magical influence, he rode toward the cave on his horse, ready to unravel the mystery. The aristocrat dismounted from his horse, and entering the dark depths of the cave, finally spotted Rachel, whom he had been looking for so long. The girl lay unconscious on the cold stones, her eyes tightly closed, and her body, as if not belonging to this world, rested limply in the darkness. The worried young man knelt down before the lady, gently touching the woman's hand, and pronouncing the lady's name with genuine excitement and anxiety, hoping for an answer. As if sensing her brother's voice entering her dream, the girl slowly opened her bright blue eyes, and still immersed in slumber, sleepily looked at him, gradually awakening from a deep and restful sleep. Lucian immediately began to ask worriedly about his sister's well-being, to which she replied that everything was fine. She just felt tired after a long and exhausting day. These words calmed the boy, who was truly happy to know that Rachel was completely fine and alive, despite all the trials she had to face. Snuggling closer to the nobleman, the little girl admitted that she had been very frightened by the abduction, and still could not shake off the feeling of anxiety that had gripped her at that terrible moment. At that moment, the boy suddenly heard a strange noise behind them, which made him become wary and turn around, trying to understand what or who could have made it. Lucian spun around his hand, outstretched its magic blazing menacingly, as he loudly demanded that whoever was in the cave show themselves immediately. These mysterious figures turned out to be werewolves, who with their heads bowed obediently came into the cave with the goal of delivering food to their mistress, demonstrating complete devotion and loyalty. Rachel hastened to reassure her brother, gently explaining that these strangers were in fact her pets, with whom she played as a child, and that they could be trusted. Kneeling down before the girl, Oscar tenderly handed her the ripe, juicy apples that glistened in the soft light. Damien enthusiastically handed Rachel fresh berries, and soon the two boys were engaged in a heated argument over who would be the first to present their catch to her, each trying to make the best impression. The aristocrat, without wasting any time, quickly settled the dispute by taking one apple and several berries in order to enjoy the taste of both treats and leave no doubt in the minds of either contender. With these actions, the aristocrat satisfied everyone present, and the pets in turn were pleased and happy. The girl was also curious to know if the Duke, who had also been attacked, was okay. She ate her food, thinking about the Duke's condition and hoping that he had been able to cope with the danger and recover from the incident. Smiling, Lucian assured that her father was fine and had successfully dealt with the difficulties, which brought relief and joy to the girl. The nobleman, who was completely taken aback by the surprise, froze in amazement when he was asked how he had been able to know that Rachel was in a mysterious and hidden cave. The boy, trying to hide the truth, cunningly lied, claiming that he had decided to go searching in the forest, while the rest of the group explored the city area. Hearing these words from her brother, the girl lit up with pride. Her face sparkled with happiness, because he turned out to be so smart and wise that even the wildest expectations could not describe his deep maturity. A dark voice emanating from behind the aristocrat ominously whispered that all his achievements modestly displayed were the fruit not only of his skill, but also of the influence of Encho-sensei, who guided his every step. Together, the men left the cave and headed for the Duke's estate, overcoming difficulties and fatigue with unwavering confidence in their goal. A long and grueling journey lay ahead of them. Rachel's pets, noticing her anxiety, confidently asked her not to worry, explaining that together they could see perfectly well in the dark and would be able to show her the right way. While the werewolves were once again discussing who would show them the way, Lucian carefully placed his sister on the horse, doing so with special care and attention. Pausing in his thoughts, Demian decided to observe the area from above to get a full picture of what was happening. Oscar transformed into a white fox to survey the road from the ground and carefully study his surroundings. Rachel and Lucian, sitting on horseback, carefully followed the tracks of the animals that wriggled before them, trying not to miss a single detail and staying focused on every step. The girl's thoughts were completely consumed by thoughts of her captor. Even in the original, Elliot displayed traits of a scoundrel prone to easy threats and manipulation. A shudder ran through the girl's body as she remembered how she had splashed hot sauce in the face of someone who had really irritated her. The aristocrat took her trembling as a sign that she was freezing, so he hugged the girl tighter, trying to warm her with his own body and provide the necessary comfort. Rachel smiled happily. At that moment, it seemed to her that nothing in this world could frighten her, and all her worries disappeared, leaving only a feeling of safety and peace. After the werewolf had returned to his human form, he announced with satisfaction that the long-awaited moment had arrived, and they had finally arrived at the appointed place. Lucian expressed his sincere gratitude to the animals for their help, and then added that they can return home to the forest where their cozy home is located. Feeling the growing tension between the pets and Rachel's brother, she began to wonder if the werewolves could have stayed with them at Pedro's mansion, maintaining an atmosphere of harmony. The guys continued to consider the girl their true mistress and sincerely wanted to spend every day with her. As an argument, the girl awkwardly admitted that she felt obligated to take responsibility for those she had tamed and become attached to. The aristocrat himself had no objections and was completely in agreement with this decision, but their father could have his own opinion and express his dissatisfaction with this choice. Unable to resist the charm of sweet Rachel, the brother nevertheless agreed to try to convince Pedro to change his mind and views on the current situation. The butler tried to calm the Duke, who, unwilling to be appeased, fiercely resisted and showed a desire to immediately rush off to search for his children. The servants were deeply concerned about the wound the man had received during the battle, but the housekeeper's attempts to ease his suffering were unsuccessful. Suddenly, when the conflict reached its peak, a guard on horseback rushed towards the group, breaking the tense atmosphere. The young gentleman and Rachel returned, and their unexpected appearance astonished both the Duke and the butler, leaving them completely perplexed. A little lady stood near the entrance with her brother, while servants helped them with the horse, carefully watching their every move and making their task easier. The attention of the nobles was drawn to a loud cry that rang out in the air, calling Rachel by name, causing everyone present to become alert and turn their gaze in the direction from which the sound came. Pedro, with an anxious expression on his face and an incredible speed, was racing towards them on his horse, trying to get there as quickly as possible and offer help, as if trying to overcome the barriers of time and distance. Descending from the animal, he carefully and tenderly embraced his daughter, as if trying to convey to her all the warmth and love that he could express. Just as they were enjoying the peace and quiet, a sudden loud sound coming from the forest interrupted their peaceful moment. In the girl's arms was Oscar, who, emitting a piercing and sharp squeak, attracted everyone's attention, like a magnet attracting glances and creating an atmosphere of anticipation around himself. A falcon fluttered gracefully nearby, and Rachel, with a slight awkwardness, introduced her former pets to her father, feeling mixed feelings boiling in her heart, causing her to tremble internally. The lady said that it was they who saved her, while the animals pretended to be completely innocent, as if they had nothing to do with what was happening. Having transformed into humans, they bowed their heads respectfully and bowed deeply before the aristocrat, thus expressing their respect and gratitude. With a sweet and pleading face, Rachel asked her father to allow her to keep the pets in their estate, hoping for his kind heart and understandings. Leaning toward Rachel with a gentle smile, Pedro offered to grant her any wish if she would start calling him Daddy, thereby adding a light note of play and fun to the conversation. The girl lowered her head, collecting her thoughts. If she hadn't asked for help, the pets would have gone back into the forest. Smiling sweetly, Rachel politely asked the Duke to fulfill her request, adding the affectionate Daddy at the end of her address to emphasize her respect and sincerity. The man tenderly hugged his daughter and promised to fulfill all her wishes to make her happy and show her his love. The aristocrat ordered the palace guard, who was located behind, to prepare for the werewolves not only the most luxurious room, but also exquisite dishes in order to make their stay as comfortable and pleasant as possible. As soon as he heard about the food being prepared, Oscar immediately demanded that they bring delicious chicken and a variety of sweets demonstrating his culinary taste and preferences. Pedro carefully placed his daughter on the horse and asked with genuine interest if she was tired from the ride, showing concern and attention to her comfort and well-being. Suddenly, as if struck by a sudden memory of something of utmost importance, the man turned sharply, and his blue eyes lit up with a vibrant gleam reflecting a wide range of deep emotions. Pedro, finally realizing that his son had been standing silently aside all this time, addressed him with unexpected severity, pronouncing his name with deep seriousness. The Duke, leaning towards the boy, assured him that they would discuss all the important issues that had accumulated recently, but only tomorrow, when they would be able to give it due attention. Lucian nodded silently, unable to object to his father realizing that in this situation his opinion did not matter much, and he was simply forced to obey. Sitting under an ancient tree, Elliot sobbed, holding his hand to his wounded eye, feeling the pain penetrate every cell of his body, and tears rolled down his cheeks. The bandit was completely confused when the strange substance that the girl splashed in his face caused him to experience an unbearable and sharp burning sensation that penetrated his skin to the very depths. A mystical purple magic began to manifest around the boy, like a mysterious glow illuminating his path. Elliot, feeling determined, promised himself that he would definitely find Rachel and take her blood for all the suffering she had caused him.